I think we're live.
I think we're live.
Woohoo! Is anybody here? I'm expecting to hear crickets.
We're here, and that's what really matters.
Yeah. Well, hello everybody watching now or watching later. We are here to talk about Lightbringer with spoilers because it's been 3 weeks and I am still thinking about it. So, hey, John's here.
John. Yeah, I think you were like the first one to put out a review, Yolanda. I think that book was out for like 45 minutes, and then it's like StoryTube Lightbringer review, 22 minutes long. It is great.
It's the only review on our channel that has done remotely well.
It's funny. Not Carlos's hot girl video.
I mean, that one's funny because it's done really well views wise, but it's also lost as like 5 subscribers.
But gained you some hot girl subscribers, it sounds like.
Yeah.
But
We're
the
just
real yeah. But the real hot girl book is obviously Light Space Bringer by Pierce Brown.
Yeah.
I can't believe it's been out for 3 weeks. Like, it feels like it was yesterday. Like you said, I'm still thinking about it every day. I have not read a book since finishing Lightbringer. I can't seem to care about anything. And I just started reading Red Rising this year. Like, I started book 1 in, I think, February. And fully thought it was Red Rising, just to see what all the hype is about. And now I'm like, when Red God, when? Now. So yeah, fully has taken over my brain.
Yeah, definitely. Did you go straight through all 5 or did you take a break after Morning Star?
I think I took a little break. I had like some in-between things, but it was like my primary, it turned into my primary focus. I didn't even expect to like read the entire series this year. I think I like vaguely knew that a new book was coming, but I didn't have to sit through that wait of like Dark Age to Lightbringer. So I got pretty lucky and that like, oh, I finished. Oh, there's a new one in a month. Cool. Nice. So yeah, but no, I didn't expect to just binge it all like I did, but yeah, they just keep getting better every book. And I don't think I've seen anyone disagree that Lightbringer is like the best yet. And that they just keep getting better. Its Goodreads score is insane. Just keep getting higher.
I just like, usually when a book comes out, and sometimes I check in after a little while because I'm just curious, and like usually if it starts out really high, it starts to level out when more people read it. But the fact that it keeps getting higher, I think last time I checked it was like 479. What?
Yeah. And yeah, it's cool that it keeps getting better because it keeps getting like more and more complex, but it doesn't seem to be losing any of its like original like heart and emotional impact. Like, it is getting so complicated, and like I like to think of myself as like an aspiring writer, but I think of like world building, and it is a world, and this is an entire solar system with like full different societies, and it just keeps getting more complex and like more emotional. Like, every book I cry more than I did the previous book.
Yeah, definitely. I have actually loved how the world building has been expanding, especially in the sequel books. Like how we've explored the Rim and Mercury, and like how different they feel, and there's a real atmosphere to it where like Mars just, I mean, it's Mars, yeah, sure, but it feels like Earth, like that's just what you're picturing, where like the rest of it has a very distinct atmosphere, and that's just really cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to. I can't believe it. I feel kind of silly being like, oh, I can't believe it's almost over. My Red Rising journey's almost over. I've been reading this series for like 7 months. Everyone else like started back in 2014 in the mines of Mars. This pixie's got no business being, yeah, no, I'm so happy I decided to read this series this year, and now we're talking about Lightbringer.
Yes, well, we just get right into it and just talk about Lightbringer. Warning, yes. If you haven't noticed it from the title, we're going to talk full spoilers of Lightbringer, first full spoilers of the entire series. So if anybody of the 5 people that are here, and I think one of the 5 is actually me with a tab open, so the 4 people hasn't read Lightbringer, now is your time to mute this.
Yes.
Okay, so I have prepped nothing. I just expect us to start talking and just roll from there.
Sounds good.
So do you want to just start with like general thoughts on Lightbringer? I guess we've kind of touched on that already, but like in terms of
maybe like some biggest takeaways.
Yeah.
I can't believe like how in-depth Pierce Brown is making me think about like morality, and like more than like any philosophy class I ever went to, just like different forms of like ethical structures, and making me question like, is honor a good thing? Like just so many, man, these characters are so good. And as you can tell from my name, maybe I am a notorious pixie. I am a Lysander apologist, maybe not so much anymore, but
yeah, to be fair.
Yeah, he's like such a interesting villain / anti-hero, and like Darrow himself, our hero, has done like absolutely awful things. Everyone in these books is a war criminal, but the way that Pierce writes them, and like from such a like introspective, like goal-oriented and societally like effective level, yeah, you find yourself like agreeing with like genocidal maniacs sometimes, and then I do. Maybe I shouldn't speak for everyone there, but yeah, just how well he does like these moral conundrums. It's so like, people talk about like, ooh, like morally gray characters and how they're so much better. Like this, I feel like is that, but on such a more like nuanced level, that I'm just blown away with like the depth of like these themes of morality and ethics, and how much he gets you to like think about your own ethical ideas and worldviews. I went into this series thinking like, oh, fun space opera, like spaceship battles, and came out like utilitarianism or deontological. Like I didn't expect that. So that was my big takeaway from Lightbringer, is like how well he's like how much he's getting me to think like more than any like philosophy professor ever did, which is crazy.
Yeah, I think that really hits the nail on the head for me of like why this book elevated the series from, it was already one of my favorite series, but to like all-time favorite. It's kind of on the podium status, because yeah, I think he doesn't really get enough credit for that, weirdly. And like, it's a very popular series, and like clearly people love it, but I feel like if you talk about Red Rising to someone who maybe hasn't read it or has like just heard about it, the impression is very much of like, oh, it's fun sci-fi. People praise it for like good character relationships and like great action and plot twists and stuff like that. But I don't think he gets enough credit for just how well-rounded his characters are and his character development, especially like later on, like you said, like it just keeps getting better. And yeah, thematically, it's just so rich. Like I haven't stopped thinking about the book, and it's partially just because I'm thinking about the characters and the stuff that happens and I'm just not getting over. But also, yeah, and this is why I'm so excited to talk to you about it, because we talked about it briefly on Discord, and I haven't stopped talking about thinking about what you said about honor, and if it's a good thing or a bad thing, and what does it actually mean, because it gets thrown around a lot as a concept by characters in science fiction and fantasy, especially. I feel this trope of the honorable character that, you know, does maybe bad things, but only in the name of whatever. But what does it actually mean? And it can mean different things, and is it only a good thing if it works out? Like,
right. Yeah, like is intention versus consequence like what we should be looking for if someone is a good person? Like like we all know the like my honor remains, like that can bring me to tears, but is that like just an emotional response because of how well Cassius is written, or is it because like that honor to do like a stupid thing because it's the right thing even if it hurts people, like is that a good thing? I don't know. I same as you, I've been thinking about this since finishing it, and I can't believe like the tailspin that Pierce Brown wrote me into here, considering all these things. So yeah, I totally agree. The like there are the plot twists and there is the action and like the huge battles and the crazy set pieces, but like, and those are so fun in the moment, but when the book is done, those aren't the things that I remember. Like I think about like what the characters went through and how they come to the decisions that they come to and why I feel a certain way about this one versus this one when they're both like killing millions of people. And yeah, it's amazing. I think Pierce Brown is a genius. Like I agree. I don't think he gets nearly enough credit for like how well these are written, and his like just the on a technical like prose level, these just keep getting better and better. Like I'm jealous. he's 2 days younger than I am. And that's why he's such a good writer. He's an Aquarius.
Clearly.
No, I think he's written an amazing series. And yeah, these characters are going to stick with me for a very long time. Whether I like them or not, or whether that changes the next day. Like I went on quite the journey with Lysander. I like ever since Iron Gold, I'm like, oh, Lysander's awesome. Like, yeah, he might be like kind of a bad guy or might be setting up to be a bad guy, but like you can see like, and I think because he writes these characters so well, you can see their goals and how they came to these places. And like he can really make you hope for the best for people that you probably shouldn't be hoping for the best for. I
think Lysander is such an interesting character. Like he's a fascinating character to think about, especially I think in Lightbringer specifically, we get such a parallel and contrast between Darrow and Lysander. I'm not sure how I pronounce it differently in my head all the time, but
same.
In Iron Gold, I'm actually not sure. I don't remember if I liked him. I don't think I liked him or disliked him in Iron Gold. It was just like, okay, where are you gonna go? Like I'm not sure what to make of you. And then in Dark Age, I ended up hating him in a really good way, like in a love to hate kind of way. And now, I mean, he does obviously unforgivable things in Lightbringer and plans to do unforgivable things. But yeah, like I think throughout all of or most of Lightbringer, he feels like still the lesser evil between like him and Atalantia and Atlas and like all of these psychopaths. But is he still the lesser evil towards the end? I don't know. Like maybe we're jumping towards the very end of the book, but with the bioweapon, do you think he actually intends to use it, or does he intend to use it in terms of using it to threaten or something like that?
So I don't know. I was thinking a lot about this last night, thinking about this chat today and what we might say about that. I was trying to think, is there anyone else you would prefer to have that device? Because like, could we trust Darrow with that device? Like Darrow has shown that maybe not so much in Lightbringer. He had so much character growth in Lightbringer, and we'll probably get to that. But like Dark Age Darrow, if he had that device, like, would there be any golds left on Mercury? But Lysander, like so far, has been very like calculated. We get like if this, then this, and then if this, then this, and this is better for more people. So like, I don't want him to have this device. I feel like maybe in the end, before the whole thing went down, maybe he was hoping that Atlas had been unsuccessful in retrieving it. But when he found out that it was there, like, he thought, I'm the best person to have this, because unlike psychotic Darrow, who will fly into a rage and just kill everybody, like, I should probably have it. Atlas probably shouldn't have it. Atalantia certainly shouldn't have it. Like, if this thing exists and it's out in the world, I should be its possessor, because I will do like the least harm with it. So I can kind of see, like, my biggest issue with Lightbringer, like, I loved the book, but when I first read it, and you know this, I was mad about this decision. I was ready to knock a whole star off my review, because like I didn't understand why he would do it. Like, we get so much motivation for Lysander for everything he does, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, like, genocide device, I think I'll take that. And I was like, where did this come from? So it felt like kind of out of nowhere. I wish we could have gotten a little bit more like introspection from him on why he made that decision. Like, was it a last minute decision when he found out that Atlas had it, or was it something that he'd been planning the whole time? I don't know. And I would really like to know. And I hope we find out in Red God. So I guess short version, I have no idea how to feel about Lysander having this thing, other than like, who else could we trust with it? Not that we can trust him with it, but like, who else could we trust with it? Would anyone else have that thought? Like, should I kill my own color with it? Like,
yeah, that's a really good point. Like, who would we trust with it? I saw John said Virginia. She's probably the best candidate that I can think of.
Okay.
Darrow.
It's easy to forget about Virginia. She was gone for the last.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I definitely wouldn't trust up to Dark Age Darrow with it. Darrow now, has evolved a lot, and I don't know if trust is maybe too strong a word still, because he does have, I think if you corner him, he could have it in him. I honestly, I think the one person I maybe would have trusted to have it and not ever use it would be Cassius. Obviously that's not going to happen.
Cassius would have like put it on his bookshelf as like a little like, look what I have.
Yeah.
A little memento from my time with Darrow.
I think in terms of like Lysander's motivation, I totally understand why it bothered you. I didn't think about it at all as I was reading it. I think because I was already so angry at Lysander the entire time that I was like, yeah, this checks out. Like, I didn't question that maybe like, where did this decision come from, because it didn't shock me, because I was kind of waiting at this point for him to like just embrace the fact that, I don't know, he's gonna do whatever it takes, I guess, in his mind. But then thinking about it, I think I don't know if I think that he intends to actually use it, or if he just intends to use the fact that he has it, or the information, that he has, that exists, to pit the right people against each other, or something like that, which would feel a bit more Lysander, because he's a strategic kind of manipulator more than a genocidal maniac. Like, that's so I feel maybe that's where he's going with it. I don't know. I fully expect us to get more information on that in Red God. Like, I wonder, was the choice to not include it at the end of Lightbringer to just focus on Cassius and like his send-off, and then go into and just leave us with the little breadcrumbs of like, remember, Lysander has this now, he's thinking about what he wants to do with that, and then go into that plot line, I guess, in Red God. That's the only explanation I can think of that of why we didn't get like a longer, I don't know, rationalization, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, after we talked about it, and you made the point like, well, yeah, I always expect him to do something terrible, and then that made me think like, oh, I've just been always expecting him to do the right thing, but like, why would anyone think that? So I don't know. I probably just had a little too much. I said I got duped. Like Lysander totally duped me. I was fully like, oh, redemption arc, it's gonna happen. Like he's gonna join the Republic. We're gonna have like, why? That's like my fault. That's I just read it stupid, I guess. I don't know. I held out hope, but then thinking about it more, I'm like, no, you know what? Lysander is gonna get redemption. This is what Pierce does to you. Just anything could happen. People are complicated. And again, I think that's why the series is so good. Like everyone's motivations can be so understandable no matter what they do. Like there's a reason for everything. We might not know it yet. And we only get certain glimpses of things, but like any position that you're in to see a person, like you can see them from any angle. Like there's people that only see a certain side of Lysander and think he's like the Lightbringer and he's the new shepherd and he's coming to save us with this blood of Selenius. And there's people who see Darrow who think like terrifying Reaper person come to destroy everything that's held society stable. So yeah, it just depends on your point of view, I guess. I can't wait to see what Lysander does. Yeah, I'm fully enthralled by all of these characters, regardless of whether or not I like the wrong one and then feel stupid.
But that's the thing though, because I think it's not like he was making Lysander very obviously like, oh, he's gonna be a bad guy. Like he was always teetering on the like line between one and the other, and like because he's also, I think it's what am I trying to say? I think like Pierce Brown gets so much criticism for how he handles first person POV, especially in the early books. And I think that's warranted, even though like it didn't bother me to the extent that it bothers a lot of people. But he gets so much better at being more subtle with that. And I find that Lysander is a bit unreliable because he doesn't necessarily see himself the way his actions are presenting him. So you're in his head and he's rationalizing what he's doing to himself. And you're like, yeah, this makes sense. I get where you're coming from, because he's kind of lying to himself about what he's doing. And like, it's very gradual as well. And then like at the beginning of or towards the beginning of Lightbringer, when he decides to sacrifice, my God, how do you pronounce this guy's name? Lyastus or whatever it is. I think.
Yeah, the Master Maker. Yeah.
And he has, kind of a mentor relationship with him, and for the greater good. And like he does these things like one step after another, but he keeps telling himself like that he's doing it for X reason, and he rationalizes it. So you're reading it from his point of view, and you're like, yeah, this okay, I get it. Like this might be, objectively a bad thing to do, but I understand where you're coming from. So because he's rationalizing it, you're rationalizing it, and you just go along with it. And we don't really see him from anybody else's perspective that's like with him all the time. We only see him from far away, then from Darrow's, and Darrow obviously is not going to like him. But then Darrow has Cassius next to him saying like, no, he's good at heart and he's honorable and all that kind of stuff. And that just feeds into you being like torn, like, well, he's doing these things, but he thinks and he's saying this and he believes this. And so I think it's just really cleverly done that depending on where you stand and what decision you've made before, you're looking for the good or the bad. And then you're either like, yeah, fuck this guy. I knew you were going to do something like this. Or you're like, what are you doing? Like you were so close to doing the right thing.
Yeah. No, that's such a good point. I think you're right. He totally like not like gaslights himself, but he has such a high opinion of himself, and probably a lot of that stems from like his programmed and just societal like superiority complex of being a gold, that he's like, well, obviously I know better, like I'm a gold, duh. So he like convinces himself that he's doing the right thing, and then he just talks himself into these things, while like he can, anybody can justify anything to themselves if they try hard enough, and he just happens to be like really convincing in his POV, in convincing me too, and hoping that he might overcome all of these things, because like his whole upbringing, and then having the chair used on him to various extents, his parents having been reformers and obviously suffering the consequence of that, it seemed like he had so many opportunities to do the right thing, whether that meant like joining the Republic or whatever his plan was. Like there were so many chances, and he just is falling into the old gold way of things, of just domination because we're better. And I was really hoping that he was going to break out of that. And then, like you said, Cassius is here telling like he's an honorable guy, like he'll do the right thing. And then you have Diomedes, who's also one of the most honorable people in the series, and he's like, yeah, like he's a good dude. So you're like, yeah, well, yeah, then I'm right, he's a good dude. And then he's like
yeah, I was reading that scene where both Cassius and Diomedes are talking to Darrow, and Darrow is that like they can't both be wrong, right? And I was sitting there reading it thinking, yes. I feel like they're wrong, but Darrow, like maybe he's making a good point. Like, can they both be wrong? Maybe I should trust Cassius's opinion. Like, does he know Lysander better than I do? So he really got me in Darrow's shoes there, like thinking the same way, where like I was fully with Darrow. I was like, no, we cannot trust this guy, like no way. Yeah. But he had me questioning it, and then they were wrong.
Yeah. And for Lysander being someone who like thinks he gets it right all the time, or at least is always on the right track to do something, like he sure is falling straight into the footsteps of the people who he's saying like we shouldn't be doing it this way. Like he was against the way Atlas and Atalantia were doing things. Like he showed like total horror at everything they were doing. Like he didn't want to be like Atalantia's like sex slave betrothed. He didn't want to be like the Lightbringer of the Rim, but he goes along with it like just because he sees that it's like probably the best way to go. But then near the end, it's like he really took that like super chilling Atlas quote to heart, the one that's like the greater the trauma or the worse things we do, like the longer the peace. It's like he finally like something snapped and he's like, you know what, that sounds good. Let's start a famine in the Rim. So I can't wait to get more of his perspective and introspection and motivations. And I also want to know more about the Pandemonium chair and everything that was done to him. I could see us getting like maybe some more like Octavia info in Red God, because I feel like this like Red God is really going to be like the versus book. It's going to be like Darrow and co versus Lysander and co. And so I could really see getting like a ton more information on like the really, because I mean, it's kind of what the series is about, right? Like your inbuilt biases and like what made you the way that you are to do what you're doing. And so I really like more of that for Lysander and everybody.
Yeah, I would love that too. Some more Octavia info and like what exactly happened with the Pandemonium's chair. And because I feel like it's definitely a contributing factor to why Lysander is the way that he is and why he's ultimately making the choices that he makes. But I would love to get more about that. I think like what you were saying with how he's falling into the same patterns over and over again, even though he tells himself that he doesn't want to, right? Or that he's against them. I think what that has me thinking, what's so interesting, which I don't even think is like maybe intentionally in there, but it just has me thinking about it. Like, you can kind of look at it as, oh, there's the society the way it is, and there's the Republic, and what Darrow is fighting for, and these are the two sides, and that's it. And he's kind of shown us that there's a lot of gray area in between, like even like a character like Lyria in Iron Gold and Dark Age particularly, who does not like the figure of Darrow and has suffered a lot under the Republic and has been neglected by the new government, but is certainly also not in favor of the society. Like there's a lot of middle ground, and Lysander kind of fit into that middle ground where he believed in the ideals of the society, but just not what it is in practice at the moment. But the more time goes on, the less gray area there kind of is. I mean, it exists, but like it kind of gets you thinking, can you allow yourself to have gray area when there's so much at stake? Like even Lysander having to make those choices and saying, okay, so I either negotiate with Darrow and like find a middle ground with him, or just entrench myself even further in just this one thing, which is a society. And like, if I have to fall back on methods that I'm not fully comfortable with, then I'll just have to do that for the greater good. Which is another thing of like, you know, the greater good. It's another
isn't that what like the Death Eaters said in Harry Potter? Like Voldemort's whole thing was the greater good.
Yeah.
They love using that for doing terrible, terrible things. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's like Lysander seems to want like the hierarchy without the slavery. And like even Darrow, I was kind of surprised. I think it was in Iron Gold when like, you know, the war is what, like 10 years on and the Republic is a thing. But there's still a hierarchy there. Even though they call it democracy, like you still have leadership and you still have like privileged people at the top ruling over people. And they got there through various means. It's not like we picked the best people for the job. It's just like this person's in this position because of all these events. So even they're not saying they're as bad as like the society, but like there's still hierarchies, and like they're working off like inspirations of a political system that is like ancient to us. And this is like so far in the future, and they're still going off of like parliaments and democracy. Like you haven't come up with anything different. And it makes me think that there's like a bit about just human nature being sort of hierarchical in there. Like just by nature, whether you're a red, a gold, a American or a Roman or an Irish person, there's just like hierarchy is part of humanity, and it's up to people to not abuse that, but then they just always do. So how do you break out of that when that's like all that's ever happened?
That is how, like, I wonder what he's going to do with Red God. Because exactly. Like he's kind of showing us how we recycle political systems, right? And like all the time, but like, when is there ever something completely new, and how long does it last before falling back into patterns? Which, by the way, I think we've gained a couple of viewers. Hi, before I forget. But yeah, like what I think is super interesting is that little glimpse that we got, like a little tidbit that never gets addressed again in the book, but it's there, and there's no way it's just a coincidence and it's going to be forgotten. And that's Quicksilver's colony of non-colored like humans. Like that's really interesting. I wonder where that's going to go, because with this society, the hierarchy is kind of made genetical by the color system. So you can kind of say, yeah, we're all equal now, but does that really like leave people's brains like not that easily, especially when you can like see it in people's like physical abilities and like all that kind of stuff, and like the sigils on their hands and that kind of thing. So I wonder if we're going somewhere like let's move away from the colors. Like, how would that even work? Like, maybe the weapon doesn't work the way we think it works. Maybe it doesn't kill colors. It just makes you not of a color. This is literally something that I thought of in the last 5 seconds as I was speaking.
No, that's great. Yeah, like a post-color society. I mean, we like even just in regular like political discourse, you hear like post-racist or post-racial society and things like that. But like, what if we see carving on a mass scale to where there is no like this weapon isn't going to work because like the color doesn't exist anymore. Like everyone has so many pieces. Like would it work on like if you set that device to kill all the reds, would it work on Darrow?
I was thinking that. I was like, would that work on Darrow as a red or as a gold? And then rereading Red Rising, like the first book, I was thinking it probably wouldn't work on him as a red, right? Because they replace everything.
Yeah, like what?
Gold?
I guess we need more info on how it works. Like what is it targeting? Like is it a DNA thing? Like do you change your DNA if you change everything else about you? Like, what is it targeting? And then, yeah, how do we get around that? Like, yeah, no, that's such a good point with the Quicksilver decolorized society. And like, what kind of hierarchy are they going to come up with? Because they probably will come up with one. Like, and is that just like a personality trait? Like some people are just leaders and they will like steamroll everyone in order to get things the way that they want it to be. Is that because of like socioeconomic factors? Like are leaders born out of like need and resource? And there's a book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, which I don't know if it's been like debunked at this point, but it like poses pretty interesting arguments with like every how societies evolve based on like their geographical location and the resources that they have. Like if a land is really rich in like large animals, they get a lot more stuff done and they progress faster because they have like beasts of burden that can carry stuff for them. Or if they have, they're next to a river, they can grow food and settle and get richer. So it's like all based on it's you can't look at things as like genetically superior for reasons. You have to look at like progress based on resources. So in a world post scarcity, like would there be hierarchy? And can Quicksilver's experiment find that out? What happens when that like generational ship starts to break down and people don't know how to fix it? Like, is that going to inspire a whole new hierarchy? So I think like resource has a lot to do with hierarchy in society. And then something else I was wondering, kind of back to Atlas's whole philosophy of like do the most harm so that future generations are more prosperous for longer. Like the more like, yeah, you're going to expand into the solar system and billions upon billions of people are going to like reap these rewards and have a better quality of life. But like the more people there are, just the more suffering there is. So like you can make things better, but is that in turn just making more things worse? Because now there's more people in need and now there's more people to fall under a hierarchy. And now there's more chances for more genetic engineering to make more slave classes. So it's just, humans are a mess.
Yeah, it's a never ending cycle, right? Which I guess even just talking about it feels exhausting because you never get to a conclusion where you're like, yeah, this is the perfect solution, obviously, because if there was an easy solution, I would assume we'd be there. But it really makes me now like also understand Lysander. Like he's come to the conclusion, like being exposed to somebody like Atlas and like being at Mercury during Dark Age and seeing what destruction on a mass scale, on a solar war brings, and just thinking there's no way to do any of this so that nobody suffers. So let's do it in the way that the least amount of people possible suffer, even if that's still which is not a decision that I would ever want to have to make.
Nope. Yeah. And like, at what point do you like? I know one of the most popular things ever is like we want a better world for our children, but at what point do you try to make a better world for like the people that are already here? Like, what are we like? Should we really be sacrificing the people that are here for potential future people, especially on like such a like huge solar system, potentially galactic scale? Like, what happens if we inflict mass amounts of suffering on billions of people so that a potential future generations have it a little bit better, but then like what happens if those generations never exist for one reason or another? Like, it's another like do the ends justify the means type thing that the whole series feels like it's based on. And you can like that on a huge epic scale like that, or even just a small scale, like should Cassius damn the entire war effort potentially to save some pink and purple children?
That ever since you brought that up, I cannot stop thinking about it. And I think that's such an interesting thing to think about, especially relating it to then when he once again does something potentially stupid and gets himself kicked.
He gets away with everything because he's so damn handsome.
I mean, how many times in the book are we reminded?
His beautiful hair and his, what do they call him? The something chin, the wayward chin or something.
Oh, yes. But yeah, like I can't stop thinking about what you said of like, sure, he's Cassius. So to start with, like that scene is going on and we have an established relationship with this character. We love this character. So you're already predisposed towards, you know, supporting him. And then he's, you know, he wants to go rescue children. So obviously you're not going to be like, no, don't go rescue children.
Bad idea. Yeah.
And it feels like the obvious on paper right thing to do of like, yes, I am going to risk myself to go save the children. And because it works, that he's proven right. And you're like, yeah, of course that was the right thing to do. He risked himself. He did the honorable thing. They saved the children. But what if it hadn't worked? Like you said, like if it hadn't worked, it would have been a disaster that would have impacted a lot more people.
And also the children.
And also the children. So kind of to your question of like, is honor a good thing? When it works out, it absolutely is. But when it doesn't, maybe not. And then we go back to the greater good, right? What's the greater good? You won't know until you've actually done it and then either failed or not.
Yeah, there's a difference between like risking yourself to do the right thing. Like if it was just Cassius on the line, like, but then we wouldn't get to have this fun discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if it's just you and your ass is on the line, like, yeah, you should probably like try to rescue the children. But again, like it feels disgusting to say that he shouldn't do it. Because like, again, like, yeah, the war effort is important and all of this is important, but like those individuals and their subjective experience is also so important. Like how do you figure out how to do anything?
I know, like let's just never make any decisions ever.
Yeah. But then that doesn't help either because the series is so good. It's so good.
And Ben just said it still resulted in a bunch of daughters dying. And yeah, so like Cassius didn't take that into consideration, right? That he might be, well, he knew that he was risking their mission, but obviously couldn't predict that the daughters were going to show up at that time or whatever. But he either didn't take it into consideration or he made the decision that was worth the risk. So he made the decision to risk other people's lives as well, implicitly, even if he didn't like actively stand there and think about it and make that call. And I guess it's easier as a reader to then say, well, we love Cassius and he did the right thing and he succeeded and so did Darrow and the children are alive. We don't know the dot. We don't care. But if we were reading from one of their perspectives for 3 books, and that happened, and we didn't know Cassius, we'd probably be like, what an honorable idiot. To do that, did he not stop and think for 3 seconds before taking action?
Yeah.
So that's so interesting to me. I think about that a lot with Lysander as well, actually, because I think if we had other people's perspectives and a different combination of perspectives, we could feel differently about certain things, not about the potential genocide, but you know.
No matter who you're looking at. Yeah, like there's so many factors to consider, and especially like Cassius didn't have very long to like sit there and get a pen and paper and be like, okay, well, here's the potential people that we're losing. Like you can't do that equation. You can only think like, it's bad if I don't save these children, which like true, but yeah, and like good thing it worked out. But yeah, I love what you said. Like if we'd been following the daughters and they were suddenly like placed in huge danger after like their years of preparation, like for this moment, for the sake of some kids. And again, it's like, why do we prioritize the people that we do? Why is it like, gonna sound absolutely terrible now, but like, why is it the children we're prioritizing? Not that we shouldn't save the children, but like, is it just like a knee-jerk reaction? Like, obviously the children are precious and we have to save them. It's like the same, it's not the same, but it reminds me of like, okay, if your wife is going into childbirth and you have to save one of them, like which one do you save? Like it's heartless and it feels horrible to say either one. But you don't let them both die. So like, how do you choose? And yeah, so it's a lot of like kind of gross like self-reflection maybe to think like, who would I choose and why? Like, would I save these children, or would I be like, well, like it's not easy to say like, oh, they're just kids or they don't matter, they're not important to the war effort, because obviously they're important. Like they are probably someone else's entire world, and to them, like, you know, that's their entire life that you're they're a number on your calculation. So how do you know? How do you make that choice? And I think just everyone would choose a little bit differently. And like, is there a wrong choice? Do you just go with the greater good? And then are you just Lysander? And are you just Voldemort? Like,
yeah, where does it stop? I think what we see with Lightbringer, as the culmination of the whole series really is when you start doing things for the greater good, where does it stop? Where's the line? Because I think you draw the line somewhere far away from you, and then you're scooching closer and closer to it, and suddenly you just push the line away. You're like, oh, well, this as well, because the greater good. And like both Lysander and Darrow have done that. And like Darrow has done horrible things, if you look at them in isolation, or in context. But Darrow has been on a really fascinating journey in that regard, and I love the little moment of real self-awareness. And he's had this a couple of times, but when Cassius rushes to save the children and Darrow runs after him, and he thinks something along the lines of, oh, he was really prepared to die for these children, and I came because I didn't want him to die. It was not about the children. And that just
this feels like a good segue to start talking about Darrow.
Yeah, let's do it.
I've been Team Darrow since like page 1. So all the people that are like, oh, Darrow sucks, he's so overpowered but also stupid at the same, stop it. Darrow is my hero. Yeah, no, I've you reread Red Rising, the first book, right? After Lightbringer? Yeah. Okay, so did I. Did you cry the whole way through like I did?
Oh my God, it was such a different experience. Like everything in the Institute just feels so emotional and nostalgic now. And the first time reading it, I was like, oh, this is so fun. Look at all of them murdering each other. And I was like, look at all of them murdering each other.
Yeah, even like the whole like the passage where he has to kill Julian. Oh my god! Like the first time I was like, I don't know who this person is. Like I don't care. This is just some kid. But now with all the weight behind it, it's like, whoa! Just watching Darrow turn like slowly turn into what we eventually see him becoming. And then yeah, I was like just stunned by his growth in
Yeah.
Lightbringer. Yeah, I'm already like.
I was blown away by, because I think maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm misremembering, but I think I read somewhere that Pierce Brown said that he didn't plan to write a sequel series, that he finished Morningstar and then afterwards he was like, oh, I actually have more story to tell. And having gone back to Red Rising after Lightbringer, that kind of blows my mind, because reading Red Rising now feels like he planned the journey, because Darrow's evolution is crazy. Like even just from when Io dies, and well, before she dies even, and she's trying to tell him to live for more, and he's like, I actually don't care about any of that. Like I want my life with you, and like I don't care.
Being a helldiver is awesome. I'm so good at it. I made Coda. We're gonna get the laurel. Yeah. Oh, sweet summer child. Yeah. Yeah. No, such growth. Like, and we really had to see him like at rock bottom in Dark Age, which was like why Dark Age was like so. I mean, Dark Age was just upsetting on like every single level for every single person. But Darrow especially, like, yeah, and seeing like how far he's come and how much he's learned, and just to see him at the bottom, like fully defeated. Like Lysander almost killed him. And to see him like overcome that in Lightbringer and like fully come into his own, like this is like the Darrow I've been waiting for. But it wouldn't have made sense to have it any sooner. Like he had to go through everything he's gone through to reach where he is now. And oh my God, it's beautiful. He's like top 10 fictional characters for me right now. The whole and I think it's like most apparent, like I think where it kind of first started for me was the fight with Sevro and Cassius and Darrow, where like Lyria gets hit and they're trying to break everything up, and that fight is like ostensibly between Sevro and Cassius, but like Darrow he's just kind of observing, and like these two people that he's been so close to in various ways that have both like maybe not so much betrayed him and then helped him. Like there's so much baggage between that friend group. So for him to just kind of like watch his two brothers like come to their senses and like come together, like I thought that was a big moment for him. And then of course I think it all culminates in his fight with Fa at the end, which is like just one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. I'm like a huge sucker for like the Zen flow state and like finally like accepting yourself and like all of your teachings coming together into something new. I really love how just like kind of going in 1,000 directions right now, but how like the Willow way is not like unbeatable anymore. Like people have had so much time to study how he fights. Like that was like his trump card for so long. It's like, oh, I'm like an expert in the Willow way, and everyone's like, that doesn't matter. Like so for him to finally like overcome all of his like preconceived like I'm so good at this and here's why. Same with like the Helldiver stuff. Like eventually people would have figured out how to be a better Helldiver than Darrow. What would he have done then? So to see him, I don't know, almost overcome his own superiority complex and fully realize himself was just lovely to see. I loved it.
100%. He feels like a real adult now, if that makes sense. Like he's over all of the, well, not all of it maybe, but like all the impulsivity and like the rashness and that, like he's a lot more rational in how he handles things. I love the whole sequence with Fa, and we can talk about Fa and Atlas more maybe later, but that was so incredibly well written from this crazy imagery of them bursting out of the Leviathan, and the duel with Fa, and in this beautiful, flowing, magical, like, fight state of mind, and then how he pursues him from island to island. Like, the entire sequence, I could see it with a soundtrack, with cinematography. Like, I was like, this needs to be filmed. Somebody really competent needs to do this, because this would be amazing.
Yeah. I loved like the island hopping, because so often you see like the defeat of the bad guy and it's just like it's in a secret room privately, and then word gets out and it's like a game of telephone, like, oh, this guy was defeated. No, this guy like went on his Taylor Swift Eras tour of like being torn down like in front of everyone over and over, and it just got worse. And I just loved that, especially where he's like trying to get help from his generals or whoever, and the one guy stands up and he's like, Ashvar? And Darrow's like, mm-hmm. He's like, oh, carry on, not gonna help. Like, it's so good. Yeah, no, that fight was incredible, and the way that he wrote it too, like, I really felt like it was one of those times where like the writing really matched what was going on. Like the prose was like so flowy and so just like hypnotizing. I was like mesmerized reading those passages of him just like cutting the spikes off of his armor, and you slowly see Fa like, oh shit, like, and then just like full dishonor. Like, we talk about honor, but like the dishonor of Fa, just like, okay, come help me out. Like, screw this dome. Like, get in here, help me, fly away, help me. Like, yeah. And then you have Cassius and Sevro, kind of watching, sniping when needed, just backup dancers. Is great.
I loved everything about that. Like you were saying, like the chopping off the spikes of his armor, like literally and figuratively stripping away the figure that he built around himself, and like exposing just how much of a fraud he was the entire time, was just so satisfying to read and confess. Yeah, I'm seeing the chat. Mm-hmm. That was just chills the entire time as I was reading it. And I was just going to say, yeah, Sevro and Cassius, reading Red Rising, there's a scene, I can't remember, before one of the battles in the first book against one of the other houses. It might have been like maybe House Minerva or Diana, one of those. I can't remember which one. And Darrow is going to duel someone, and Cassius is telling him what to do and what not to do. And I was reading it and I was like, oh my God, this is like a Lightbringer when he's telling him to use his grab boots.
Yeah, and just those little bits of Darrow, like his thoughts, like, oh, don't use your grab boot. Like, oh, Cassie's gonna be mad. I use my grab boots a little. Like, yeah. I love
the three of them together, and it felt very satisfying to have the three of them together again, and at the same time, the weight of their history. Because, I mean, talk about a fucked up friend group. Like, Darrow killed Cassius's twin. Cassius killed Sevro's dad. I mean, but I love that you can really feel the weight of what they've been through together and separately, what they've done to each other on purpose or not on purpose. And they work through it, and it's so satisfying to read and so emotional to read. Oh my goodness. Evie is asking, would you consider Lightbringer a hot girl book?
Nah, unfortunately not. I wouldn't. There's hot girls in it, but Virginia is like the hottest hot girl.
I was gonna say, if we get a lot of Virginia in Red God, maybe Red God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the really unhinged people in these books are definitely the men. Unless you're looking at like the original trilogy, like Antonia is pretty nuts.
Yeah, if you got like an Atalantia POV.
Ooh, Atalantia is definitely a hot girl. I would read like a short Atalantia POV, like of just her doing her day-to-day stuff. That would be a hot girl book. Ooh, give it.
just about her brain.
Yeah. All of those grimace ladies, nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, the whole friend group dynamic is so you mentioned like, Darrow killed Cassius's brother, and then Cassius killed Sevro's dad, and also Cassius slept with Darrow's wife, and also Cassius tried to kill Darrow, and like, Cassius, what are you doing? You're handsome, so you can get away with all of this. It's fine, but who's the bad friend here?
Yeah.
He's a really good friend to Lyria, though. Is there, like, name a more iconic duo? You can't.
I just in after Dark Age, I said the Victra, Lyria, Volga dynamic was the female friendship group I never knew I needed. And now with Cassius and Lyria, that was the friendship duo that I definitely needed. It was so wholesome. I loved it so much. Like the part where she comes up to him and says that he's a good person. I don't remember her exact words of what exactly she says to him, but
like, people don't tell you this enough, Bologna, but like, you're a good man.
Yeah. Something like that. That really got me, and it felt really earned that she would be the one to say that. And I think it was important that it was her, because she's an outsider of like that entire dynamic and history of the other three lunatics.
Well, yeah, of course he would say it. He didn't sleep with her wife and kill her dad and stab her. Of course he was a good guy. No, I love that relationship. And Ben and I were talking about this a little bit last night, like how important that friendship really is between, like, you have Cassius, who is like the epitome of a gold, like beautiful top tier warrior, like the most honorable man, funny, charming, friend to everyone, just like top tier. And then you have Lyria, who is not only a red, but she's a gamma. She's like the worst, the lowest of the low reds. She's a rat red. And they meet after she has the figment taken out. So she has no additional power. Like, she's not super powered. She is just a little rat red. And like, immediately their friendship is apparent. Like, these golds and these reds can have like beautiful relationships without any like outside influence. Like, Lyria doesn't need to be super powered. And I know this is kind of like a topic that people are talking about, like, what was the whole point of the figment if she's just going to get it taken out? But the more I think about it, the more I love that it's taken out. Like, she really decides that her humanity is what's important. Like, out of people getting carved from red to gold and people getting genocide devices, like, Lyria has her humanity, and that's all she needs. And that shows, because like the humanity that she brings to Cassius, like the way that she makes Darrow feel after accepting him and giving him that hug at the end, like, that's all she needs. And the fact that we can have like such a pure, beautiful friendship between a low red and a high gold, that's really just based on like the basic, almost like primitive human things of like sharing a drink and sharing a laugh. And like, there's no war strategy. Lyria wasn't talking like tactics with Cassius. They were just drinking buddies, having a laugh. And it was like the most beautiful friendship in like the shortest amount of time. It was so believable and so beautiful. I was like, that is like what, like, that could change everything. Like, if that got out and affected people like the way that it affected us, like, you could end the war. Like, well, maybe that's a little optimistic, but
I could not agree more. I think, I mean, you put it perfectly. That's exactly why that was so important. And I feel that way about the figment as well, because I at first thought, oh, that's it, are we not gonna, but the point of that was that she got to make that decision. And I love that she made that decision. Like you said, like, there's nothing quote unquote special to her outside of who she is as a person. There's nothing physically special about her, or like in terms of abilities. She's not like a, she's not trained with any weapons or like whatever. She's just a person who is a good person. And I think the series really at this point needed a character like that. And it means even more because she's gone on the journey that she has since Iron Gold, and she has made the decision to be who she is. I think that's a theme in the sequel books, especially like in the series, of like having choices. Like people are not just don't just fall into something. They're presented with a choice and they make that choice. Like Lysander, that we were talking earlier, he had opportunities to make a different choice and he didn't. And yeah, I love Lyria so much. She really grounds the series in some humanity. Like you were saying earlier, like everybody's a war criminal and we really need
Yeah. Lyria is how we like see the effects of the war criminal on like the common person. Speaking of which, her POV in that what is it? It's in where they come up from like the deep on Io. Is it like right before the attack on the moon? And we're in her POV and not a gold or not like someone that's fighting. And she's just like dodging things and seeing people explode above her was like harrowing. So to get it from like the point of view of like a powerless person really just shows like how messed up this war is. But yeah, no, I agree. And I with the whole like her having a choice, like I was kind of fell into that, like, oh, we're done with the figment. And I had like, there's an ulterior motive here. They definitely left it in her and didn't tell her, and it's going to trigger at some point. But like, the more that I think about it, the more I think how much more beautiful it is that Mateo gave her the choice and like listened to her and did it. But I don't think we've seen the last of the figment or the psyche. My prediction is that Pax is going to get one in Red God. Because we're already seeing him kind of like distance himself from like the emotional side of his family, and he's like getting real into his ships. And I could totally see Pax getting a psyche. And something that I thought might be interesting, kind of like poetic, would be him doing that in order to like help win his father's war, and in the process like forgetting Darrow the father. Like losing his human memories of his family in order to win his family's war. I think that would be pretty interesting. So
that is very interesting. Yeah, that would be heartbreaking in terms of the whole like making a better world for your children, right? Like, and then your child ending up being somebody who sacrifices like a significant portion of who they are for it.
Yeah. I know Pierce is gonna like wreck us in so many ways in the next book.
Yeah.
Terrible. Just like speculation. I don't know if we're on like Red God speculation yet, but I really believe that Darrow and Virginia at least are going to have they haven't been together since Iron Gold, right? Like the beginning of Iron Gold.
Yeah, I think so.
Like,
yeah.
They have to have a reunion. I don't know if it's going to be like a bittersweet one or if it's going to be like a last minute, like, oh, bye kind of one. But I really do feel like there has to be a reunion there. And with the kid, with like, I could see it being heartbreaking, but it's got to happen.
Yeah. I feel like there's going to be some kind of significant reunion, significant in the sense of that we're going to linger on it for like at least get like a 1 or 2 emotional chapters about it, like whether it's bittersweet or not, or however that plays out. Like I think I'd rather it be towards the beginning or the first half of the book and get them together a little bit before things inevitably go completely wrong. I'm so scared for what's going to happen. But yeah, I'm sure we'll get some kind of reunion. It'd be pretty evil if we didn't after all this time and after so many almost reunions.
Oh, that was heartbreaking. And like, oh my gosh, she was what, 4 days away? Like, so speaking of someone that can make hard decisions, like Virginia, like after, and especially after everything that they just went through on Phobos, and for her to be like, you got to keep going. Sorry. Like, oh, God.
Incredible.
Yeah.
She's her ability to make rational decisions and yet remain a human is I think unparalleled in the series, because you have all of the other characters that fancy themselves being, you know, rational people and like all this greater good talk and all that. And I think Virginia is the only one that has some kind of balance of, I need to do the smart thing that will be good for the whole of the Republic, while also taking into account all of these people and like the human side of things. And like the Phobos battle was amazing. I thought I would be more mad that we didn't get that much of her in the book, but what we did get was so good that, and everything else that doesn't have her was also so good that I can't really be mad. But I don't think about her that much when I think about the book, because she's not in it that much, but I love her so much.
I do too.
Character.
Yeah, I almost feel like it kind of made sense that we didn't get any more of her because she needed to recover. Like, what would she be doing? She is like laying down, licking her wounds. Like, give the girl some space. She'll be back in Red God. Yeah, the whole Phobos battle was amazing. From like on every level. And Victra, like, oh yeah, we got these guys. We got Ajax. Sorry, his body couldn't come. Like, oh my God. Yeah, just great. I was really worried about everyone. And I think like another thing that he does really well is like, I don't put it past him to kill anyone at any time. Like, I am always worried about all of them.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, Virginia too. Like, I love what you said about her, like being so like smart, but still the human side of things. Cause I wasn't completely sold like in the first book. Cause they kind of come out the gate like, oh, Virginia's the smartest one of all of us. And I'm like, okay, where though? Like Mustang's the smart one. Okay. But like how? But now, oh, I get it. Okay. Yeah. She's definitely the smart one here. Yes. And speaking of her, she has like an insider. And I was like fully convinced that it was Atlas all book for some reason. I'm like, ooh, Atlas. No.
That would have been so interesting.
Yeah, would have been yeah. Turns out he had a little bit bigger plans going on. But it's gotta be her creepy clone brother.
It's gotta be. And you know, I completely forgot about that. Because I was so absorbed with everything else. And then somebody said it, right? Like, oh, it's gotta be the Abomination. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, that guy
out there.
Yeah, because he's like obsessed with her. Yeah. So yeah, I would love to know what I kind of like. So I think that's another thing, not quite like criticism that people have had with Lightbringer, but some kind of like concerns that maybe we got too many things introduced in Dark Age to like keep going with. We had to kind of shove some off to the side, which is why like the Figment didn't really play into things. We didn't see the Abomination all book, but I for the Abomination side of things, I really like that we didn't see him this book. Like, because kind of his appeal to me is like, what is he doing? Like, what are you doing? And keeping him like totally sidelined and in the dark, because you know he's not like twiddling his thumbs. Like, he's doing something, and we're gonna see it in Red God for sure. But yeah, keeping us in the dark and keeping him mysterious, I think was definitely the right play, because it just same kind of how Atlas, even when he's not on the page, you like feel like he's gonna jump out at any moment. Like you feel that he is like a threat even when he's not there. Like you could be on any planet, like any planet in the solar system throughout Lightbringer. I was like, where's that? Who's got eyes on Atlas? But like, is it even Atlas? Is it just some other guy wearing Atlas's face in South America? Like, they're so threatening. And so especially with the Abomination just not even showing up once, like it makes him so much scarier and so much more of a threat. So
yeah,
can't wait to see what he's doing.
I also think that, I mean, obviously he's different from the original Jackal, but he's still a clone. So I feel like having him in 3 books in a row, assuming he's going to be in Red God, which I mean he will, might feel like, oh, you're recycling a really good villain and just having a clone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not what it is, but it could feel that way or could be misrepresented that way. So I kind of like that we focus on Atlas in this book, which, by the way, it just made me think, because I love what you said about Virginia and how in the first book they just say she's smart rather than like showing us. And Pierce does that a good bit, where he tells us what a character is like. Hey, Kev. And then he follows up and shows us that that is exactly what they're like. And I think that's so impressive, because so often you read a book and it's kind of a red flag if they tell you, oh, this character is really smart. I'm like, if you have to tell me, that's because you're probably not capable of showing me that they're smart. And it's a pet peeve. I hate when I'm told that somebody's smart and then through their actions, I'm like, they're not.
And then they do stupid stuff all book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he really pulls it off, where he tells us that Virginia is really smart. And then 5 books later, we're like, well, yeah, you weren't lying. And with Atlas, there's so much buildup of the fear knight, the fear knight, the fear knight.
Yeah.
We meet Atlas and oh my God, like he has earned that title. He's legitimately terrifying.
Yeah. No, he was an amazing villain. I'm really glad that we kind of pivoted in Lightbringer, like from Atalantia to Atlas, and even like from Fa and the Askamani. And kind of tying them together I thought it was brilliant. And I know it kind of goes back again to the whole Dark Age, like, oh, so many things were introduced that we had to kind of wrap things up or not talk about things. But it all felt really like organic, I guess, and effective the way that he did it, like ignoring the Abomination because it's better to leave him a mystery for now. Lyria's whole Figment plotline I thought resolved super well and also gives us a future device to come in handy. And then tying Atlas and Fa together I thought was brilliant. When it comes out that that's like a recorder or a voice changer, so, are you kidding me? And he comes out, he's talking like, oh, I just want to go to the opera. And oh, have you seen the latest plays on Venus? Oh my God, this is the guy we're all terrified of. Just genius. Like, oh yeah, like way to make a monster. Just totally subverting that. Like, because you have so many scary things. We don't need Fa to be like an actual, like, what he was trying to pretend he was being. Yeah, I thought that was brilliant. And then it also introduced like another kind of like, so, you know, like the scarier things are always like a little more human. So Atlas could totally have just been this terrifying fear knight person, but then to give him Fa as not only like a loyal general and pawn, but as a friend, like they actually really cared about each other. And so to have those two monsters showing like such friendship and care about each other, like crying when they find out each other's alive, like, yeah, like the worst monsters are the humans, and these are still humans. They just happen to be just horrifying. Thought that was so good.
Oh, that makes them so much more interesting. Like I loved that. I love the little detail of the voice being fake with Fa, like such a great representation of his whole like identity being fake. And that ultimately the scary one is Atlas the entire time. Like the whole fear aura that's coming off of Fa is all Atlas. But yeah, I love that. I think Atlas is such a genius villain, like you said, because there is a human somewhere in there. So like hidden away, but he's there. He's not just like some cold robot. And I think somebody like Atlantia, who can be fun because she's a wild card, can be overused very easily because she's less interesting, like in that way, at least from what we've gotten from her. So I think using her sparingly is great, and Atlas was just a magnificent villain. And I was surprised that he died, but I guess we're setting up like Lysander and other characters. But yeah, I didn't expect him to go.
I didn't either. I mean, I loved that fight, and I'm glad it was Cassius who did it. I don't care if Lysander took the final shot, but back to that in a second, I guess. Yeah, the moment on the Dustwalker, I think, where they're like, "That's not Helios."
That was so scary.
Yeah. Oh man. And then everything past that, finding out Atlas's whole plan, and then his whole pitch to Lysander, like, you weren't supposed to be here because I don't want to kill you. I want to prop you up as the return of Selenius, and you're gonna bring the light to real darkness. Like, it's awful, but it's not a bad plan. And yeah, just terrifying. Yeah, his presence was. I don't think we've seen the last of Atlas's plots. I think he's dead. I don't think he's coming back or anything. But I think he definitely has some like. He's got to have some like fail-safe, some setup stuff. Like, I don't know. Is that genocide device? Did he mess with it at all? Who's acting like him in South America? Does he have clones? Like, clones are obviously a thing. So I don't think we've seen the last of him in some aspect. Like, it's crazy that even though he's dead, he's like still haunting this series. Like, I don't trust that he didn't set some crazy shit up for later.
That's a great point, because we've seen that he's been plotting decades in advance with the whole Ascomani thing. So yeah, you're right. There's no way that he didn't have like a plan B and a plan C and a plan D. Maybe
even if he didn't, like, he's so scary, and like he so could have that even if he has no other plans, like, everyone's still like,
yeah,
Atlas, like, and might be that way for decades. Who knows? You never know when Atlas's next thing is going to pop up at you, even though there's nothing. Like, so effective is like that. Could not have a better title than Fear Night.
Yeah. Definitely lived up to that. I don't know. Like, it's so. Whenever he's like you said, whenever he's on the page, but also when he's not on the page, because it's almost the longer he's not in it, the scarier it gets, because you're like, oh my god, he's having a lot of time to do something. Like, can somebody please go check where he is?
The longer we don't know what he's doing, the worse it's gonna be when he shows up. Yeah, totally. Oh man. I love the naming of the knights too, like, total side note, but like how what was her name? The Love Knight. Was it Calendura, I think?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And then when Virginia, names Cassius as the Morning Knight of the Republic. Like, I don't know. Titles like do it for me. I get wrecked. Like, I'll watch Game of Thrones and Daenerys is up there reciting her titles, and I'm just like tears streaming. I don't know what it is about titles, but yeah, that the final showdown with Cassius and Atlas and Roan and Lysander and the whole like Cassius, no Al Bologna, just Cassius Bologna, Morning Knight of the Republic, brother of Darrow. Oh, fuck me, man. Like,
oh my god. It was like 2 a.m. I was reading that, and I had this like weight in my stomach. I was like, the part is called Brothers. They've been reminiscing for pages upon pages, and I don't trust anything that's happening right now. And I was like, he please leave the weapon and just leave. And it's like, he's not gonna leave. There's no way he's gonna leave. And then he says that,
Yeah. So, yeah, now imagine like believing Lysander was going to do the right thing and then going through. I was at work reading it on my laptop.
Yeah.
And I was like just waiting for a phone call, waiting for the door to open, and I was gonna have to be like, oh, I just like slammed my hand in a drawer. That's why I'm crying. No, I'm not like having to come up with some excuse of why I'm just like crying at my desk. Man, I really didn't think Lysander was gonna hurt Cassius, but the second that Atlas just knew. Atlas knew because the last thing that he says is like, hey, Cassius, ask Lysander about, what's in the backpack back here. I'm like, oh, fuck. Like, he knows that Lysander wants it or, like, just decided that he wanted whatever his motivations were. He knew, like, even if I die here, I'm taking Cassius with me. If I can't kill Cassius myself, I'm taking him with me. Because if I say this, like, Lysander's not going to let him out of here knowing that this exists.
Yeah.
So that was like his final, like, just move of like, ask Lysander about this weapon. So, and now Lysander, like, if he hadn't said anything, Cassius would probably still be alive because Lysander certainly didn't want to kill Cassius. I really don't believe he wanted to kill Cassius. I don't believe he ever wanted Cassius dead. Even like in Iron Gold, like when Cassius is fighting all of the Raws, like, I don't believe he wanted him dead. And he has like so much resentment too about like, because is it Darrow that has his bunk now on the Archimedes? Yeah, so he has like so much resentment toward like losing that part of his life, I think. That, yeah, if Atlas had not said anything, Cassius would never have known about the Idme, and Lysander wouldn't have told him, and he would have quietly taken it, and nothing would have happened to Cassius. I fully believe that. So I do, you know what? Lysander didn't kill Cassius. Atlas did. Just kidding. Making excuses for my little pixie.
No, you're right.
Making excuses for Lysander over here.
That was fully intentional. Like you said, like, yeah, he knew that with the knowledge that there's something there, Cassius was never going to just leave. Or there's even an argument for like, without the knowledge of that, Cassius would have just walked out and Lysander would have let him walk out. But even though he says, even after Atlas is dead and Lysander tells him to just leave, I wonder would he have actually let him leave when he would have taken knowledge back to Darrow.
I know. I don't know how to feel about that. Like, I don't know if I don't know. I don't know whether he would have let Cassius go. I don't think he would have. I think it would have just been easier, and I wouldn't put it past Lysander. We've seen how he dealt with Alexander in Dark Age. It wouldn't put it past me to have Lysander feel like it was easier to feel like he let Cassius go, that Cassius had a good parting image of Lysander, and then shoot him in the back.
Yeah.
Like, I think he would have done it. I don't think Cassius was getting out of there alive after he learned about it. I think just Lysander wanted to make it easier on himself to stab him in the back, metaphorically.
Yeah.
It would have been easier for him, but he had to take the hard way out. And like, again, Cassius's honor comes into play. I wonder if Cassius probably figured like, he's not going to let me out of here. And so better to make him face it. Like he says, like, if guilt is going to be the thing to drag you down, let me be the millstone. And so it may have been easier to like try and leave, maybe try and get out, maybe zigzag on your way out. So you're not an easy target, but yeah, to take the chance of getting the device away from Lysander and like making him face it down. Like, if you're going to kill me, you're going to do it to my face because it's going to be harder for you.
You know what? That's a really good point. And I think I like that more than the way I was thinking about it. Because I was thinking about it in terms of, well, he had either the choice of leaving with the information, which would have been valuable to Darrow, or gambling his life on the possibility that Lysander isn't capable of killing him. And he, obviously being Cassius, takes that gamble. But I think in terms of the chances of Red God completely destroying me, I like. I mean, it will anyway, but I like your interpretation of like Cassius saying, "There's no way I'm getting out of here at this point. I know too much, but I'm going to force you to confront it, because then if that is what breaks Lysander in Red God, and that is the one thing, because ultimately you can spin it like Cassius was kind of kidnapping Lysander or whatever, but he raised him. He partially raised him. He was a big brother to him. He treated him well. They got along. It was a happy time in a way in his life, like when he thinks about it. If this is the thing that breaks Lysander, and this comes back at some point in Red God and contributes to, you know, I don't know how to put it into words. Good prevailing seems very flat for this series and not nuanced enough, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. Mm-hmm.
Like if this ends up being the case, and it's ultimately Cassius's sacrifice that turns Lysander at the last moment, that I don't know if I can emotionally move past that.
Yeah.
Ever. But you've planted that in my head now. That is
no
thinking.
So there's been a lot of talk, because everyone hates Lysander right now. Well, right now, everyone's always hated Lysander except me. There's so much talk like, okay, how's Lysander going to die in Red God? Like, this pixie's going to get his due, and how's it going to happen? And there's so much speculation of like, you know, people are really enjoying their imagination time of all the horrible things that can happen. I want Sevro and Lysander locked in a room together with the knife that Sevro named Lysander. I want, you know, all these horrible, horrible things to happen to Lysander. Does he deserve them? Yeah, probably. But also, it's like, we've seen how Pierce makes us like feel about revenge being a motivator. And I feel like we're being set up for an actual like Lysander being forgiven arc. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, well, like, would it be satisfying to see Lysander die horrifically, like by Darrow's hand or by Sevro's hand or whatever? Yeah, but might it not feel a little hollow after everything we've gone through and how much we know that like revenge isn't everything and honor is fickle? And I don't know. I feel like Pierce is like a little too like anytime everyone's like, oh, Lysander sucks, he's like, yeah, doesn't he? So like, as much as I would love like the poetic thing of like how Lysander has gotten rid of everyone who's ever cared for him, and when he gets hung on Mars, there's going to be no one to pull his feet. As true as that is, I think it would be more like thematically traumatizing to have like Victra says, pity them. Like, maybe Lysander's arc ends in pity and forgiveness and some kind of redemption. I don't know. I still hold a little candle for Lysander redemption. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'd be lying if I said that upon finishing Lightbringer, I did not think about horrifying ways in which Darrow could murder Lysander. But I think, you know what? I think as much as I would get a lot of satisfaction out of that in terms of Lysander, it would be a shame for Darrow and his character development to resort back to that. I think it would say a lot more about Darrow and who he is and who he has become, and his relationship with Cassius, to end up forgiving Lysander if there's, you know, something in there that's left and deserving of forgiveness. That would probably be definitely more thematically traumatizing.
I feel like we just got to expect the unexpected when it comes to Pierce Brown. I feel like he's the last one to give the fans what they want. He's the one to give the fans what they need. And sometimes what the fans need is heartbreak and drama.
You said earlier that like you're legitimately terrified of anybody dying. And I think this gets kind of thrown around about a lot of authors and a lot of series of like, oh, they're just so ruthless. And more often than not, I don't find that to be true. When somebody recommends me a book or I pick up a book and people say like, oh, this author is ruthless, it broke my heart, whatever. Often it's like, yeah, but I feel like if it's in the last 100 pages of the last book, it doesn't fully count because you still get the entire series with that character. Like, you know, like it's still heartbreaking, of course, but not as heartbreaking as killing a character in book 3 out of 6. And then you have to move on with the story without that character. It's more painful. And Pierce Brown is one of the few authors where I find that to be fully true. Like, I fully believe he could kill anybody at any time. And now in Red God, certainly. And I have no idea how he's going to end it, if he's going to go, yeah, this is what humanity's like. It's all a cycle. We repeat mistakes. It just sucks. And this is how the world is. Or is he going to be a bit more hopeful? And how hopeful can you get? Like, this is not a series that you can give a clean, everything is great, unicorns and puppies, happy ending, because you'd just be like, this is not real. Like, there's no way. So I wonder how it's going to end up feeling.
My theory is that this whole series is just the backdrop for Pierce introducing an entirely new system of government that no one has ever seen before. It's like hierarchy free, like weird new mixture. I don't know. No. I don't know. I feel like it's going to be a hopeful ending. I don't know why I feel that way, but I just, some part of me feels like it's going to be more on the optimistic side. I feel like the Republic in some form is going to prevail. I don't think Darrow is making it out of Red God. I don't think he can. I think in the optimistic ending, Darrow, or like the Reaper, has to go away. Like, is there true peace with a Reaper figure? Should we symbolically hold him accountable for everything he's done, even though it's gotten us to a better place? Do we want the idea out there that like you can be a war criminal if everything ends up good? So I feel like in some form, like the Reaper is going to have to go, which is going to be really sad, but I feel like there's no way that, I don't know. I'd love to be proven wrong because I love Darrow more than like almost any other fictional character. And like you said with the deaths, like especially the early on ones that you have to live with it the whole time. Like in the beginning, in the first book, like Io dies, within like the first 50 pages. And when you're reading it the first time, it's like I barely know her. But like rereading it now is like a whole other emotional level. But the fact that not only just everyone in the whole society remembers Io and sings her songs, and this whole thing came about by her, like she has never been forgotten. And I really appreciate that, because it could have been so easy. Like people say, fridging or like the death of a female character to like push a male's plot line along. But the fact that like, especially it was so prevalent in, again, his duel with Fa, when he's in the middle of his like Zen state and he relates it to dancing with Io at Laureltide, I like lost it. I was like sobbing. Just the fact that she's still so present for Darrow after everything he's been through. He's obviously fully in love and devoted to Mustang, Virginia. But yeah, just that she's still there, still making a difference, and he still remembers her, and that like the most like probably one of the most important character changes for him. She's there in his mind. Oh, I thought it was beautiful. Ugh.
Yeah.
See, yeah,
it
just gets me so emotional.
I love how much, and this is why like I can never read the first in the same way again. And I appreciate so much, especially because people criticize the first book a lot, and it like everybody agrees that he keeps getting better, and it's true. But I think it would have been easy to kind of forget about, like, let's move on from the whole institute thing. I was just like setting up the character and like whatever, and kind of like not mention it again. But he pays homage to it, and the whole series is rooted on those early character moments, like on EO and like on the early friendships that Darrow forms in the Institute, and like that scene where Cassius calls him and Rogue brothers, like him and meeting Sevro, meeting Mustang, like all those things, like he keeps coming back to them. And in Lightbringer, that was so prevalent. And such like his entire, like Darrow's development was so seeped in like who he is and what has made him who he is, and the people and like the connections that he's formed. And I could not agree more. Like EO being remembered and keeping like continuing to be brought up, and Darrow remembering her, and Darrow loving Virginia, but that not meaning that EO was not as important, is so important to me and so special. I love that as well. I love that he brought it back to EO and back to the mine and like to being a Red, because we've been with him for most of the series being a Gold essentially, in body at least, and bringing it back to the very beginning of the series and of his journey was just so special.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, like you said, the Institute stuff kind of gets not like shat on, but like, you know, it's like, oh, book one, like Hunger Games in space, capture the flag. But like that's your childhood, or not, maybe not childhood, but like those are your formative years. Like if we were in high school murdering each other, like you'd be talking about that your whole life. Like that would be your whole life. Like that would be so formative to you. So to like pretend that the first book is just like nothing, oh, the Institute years, like those really were those formative times. And they are, again, with how like Lyria and Cassius relationship is so special, because they're just sharing a drink and a laugh. Like that's what the brotherhood comes back to. Like in Morningstar, before Cassius and Darrow have even really reconciled, their big moment in Morningstar was like sharing a drink and watching old Institute tapes. And it was heart-wrenching. Like, look where we were and where we are now, and like everything that's happened in between to traumatize us and turn us against each other. And then again, at the end of Lightbringer, when they're going through Cassius's possessions, and like even the times that he wasn't with them, even the times that he was their enemy, he was still like, he had his little box of newspaper clippings. Like they just oh man, yeah, those relationships that you form like early on, and the traumas that you share really never go away. They like make you who you are, and you have like permanent ties to people no matter what happens between you. And I like how like it might seem like the forgiveness didn't come easy for them, but on like another level, it almost felt like it had to happen. Like they couldn't not come back together after everything that's happened, after all the crimes they've committed against each other and each other's families. Like something like the Institute and going through that and forming those brotherhoods like in such a formative time of your life, that's not, you can't just, that doesn't get hand waved away. So it feels so natural that they really would like come back to each other and focus on those things and see those as the happy times, even though we were all killing each other.
100%. Yeah. Especially like, I mean, seeing how their lives have evolved, and now they're killing people on a much larger scale. It does feel like the good old days. But yeah, I really love that parallel of the scene that you mentioned of Cassius and Darrow having a drink and watching the Institute footage in Rogue's room after Rogue has died.
Right.
that was my favorite scene in the original trilogy. I think about that so often. And sure, they talk, but it's more about what they're not saying. And then at the end of Lightbringer, Sevro and Darrow going into Cassius's room and watching his Institute footage. What are you doing to me, Pierce?
He knows what he's doing.
Not allowed.
No.
But yeah, I love that so much. I have a whole other appreciation for the first book now and how he forms those relationships. And what you were saying about Cassius and Darrow, and it was so funny. I was thinking about this earlier today because reading Lightbringer and those conversations that they have when I think is it Cassius first who calls Darrow his best friend, which was adorable. And then they call each other brothers, and like that brotherhood really comes back, and they reminisce a lot, and there's joking and like all that kind of stuff, and it feels so earned. That it made me forget that they've actually only really been friends in book 1 and in Lightbringer. Sure, they reconcile in Morning Star, but it's at the end of the book, and then Cassius leaves. And that's it. But because the time that they are friends in the first book, and it's not even the entirety of the first book, it's like half of it, but it's such a formative, important time to them, but kind of also to the reader, because it felt so earned to me, and they think about each other a lot. So you do see that they've never forgotten about that time. That it felt super earned in Lightbringer, and it made me forget that we haven't actually spent that much time with the two of them together. Yeah, which it makes it so much more heartbreaking as well.
Yeah, it's crazy, like the skill that it takes to like write that too, because like in the first book, like, and it's so interesting seeing Cassius in book 1 because it's the same guy, but with a lot more of the bravado and the like womanizing and just the gold about him is so much more prevalent. And like it's like he gets kind of broken down in subsequent books. Like he gets taken down notches, like especially like in book 1 he gets pissed on by Titus. Okay, yeah. And yeah, just the decisions that he makes and just the vindictiveness of him. But he's always the same guy. He's that like kind of a himbo, like just kind of a hot, rich dummy, but like a heart of gold somewhere. And through his hardships, like he learns who he is, like just as Darrow learns who he is. And so, yeah, it feels so natural. And then, oh my gosh, I love the line in Lightbringer that's like, when Cassius was going back to get Darrow off Mercury, like he was just worried that he wouldn't be accepted. Like all he was worried about was that Darrow was gonna not like him.
Like, that broke my heart.
Yeah.
And it totally makes sense, because under all of that bravado, there is a lot of insecurity about the bad stuff that he's done, and the stuff that he's done in the name of the wrong ideals, or where he's made the wrong choices, or he's very self-conscious about the fact that it took him a long time to truly decide to stand with the Republic or with Darrow. But I don't remember the line exactly or what exactly it is that Darrow thinks, but it stuck with me so much. Like towards the end of Morning Star, I don't remember if it's when like Cassius leaves with Lysander or something like that, and Darrow thinks something to the effect of like, he's a much better person than me or something like that. And it just got me thinking, like, even just thinking about the first trilogy, it is easier for somebody who is not in a privileged position to see the flaws in a system and to rise against that system, because you're the victim of it and you're not profiting of it. Whereas if you're the one that's profiting from a system, it's more difficult to, first of all, see the issues, but also to stand against them, because that would mean that you're actively seeking to put yourself in a worse position. So it's easier for somebody like Darrow to do the right thing in terms of fighting for a more equal, just society than for somebody like Cassius. But Cassius makes those choices anyway, whereas Darrow didn't even want to do it, and to start with, he had to kind of be dragged into it, and that always really like got to me back then. And what we see of Cassius in the following books really confirms that the person that Darrow saw is the person that he always was, but he didn't realize it until Lightbringer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's such a good point. And that's like what I wanted for Lysander. Like,
Yeah.
I really wanted him to see, like, even though he's like Cassius got some, it's like all the people that Darrow kind of affects, like they can see it because they see Darrow and what he's doing, and he's like a good influence on them. Like, yeah, they have to, if that's not in them, they're just gonna ignore it. But like for someone like Lysander who doesn't have a Darrow, he has a Cassius, but he doesn't have like red friends. Like maybe in Lightbringer he has some red soldiers, but even that just like reinforces his position. Like, oh, these reds with their claw drills, they're gonna help me attack Phobos. Like, they don't want to be like liberated. Like they know their place and they're happy there. Be like a slave owner, be like, but my slaves love me, so what's the problem? But yeah, I was really hoping that he would kind of have that epiphany at some point, and I think that really goes to show that like exposure really is everything. Like, yeah, you have to be a good person, you have to be ready to, like, you have to be in a place to accept the right side of things. But if all you know is like, I just know these slaves love being slaves, like, what in your brain is going to trip that's not true? I was like really hoping that Lysander would have that epiphany, but it does not seem like that's happening. So yeah, and I think that just goes to show like how important like representation, I guess, and exposure and getting outside your comfort zone and meeting new people and talking to people outside your own echo chamber, for lack of a better phrase, is very important. Because how do you can't know what you don't know. Like, you can't know something you haven't been exposed to. So I think that's why knowledge and learning and reading is so important, because it introduces you to things that you would not ever come across. And so that's like something I'm always worried about. Like, what am I doing wrong that I just don't know I'm doing because I just don't know about it? Like, there's something. Like, what is going to be the slavery of the 21st century? Like, we don't know. So
yeah, I think you made such a good point when you were talking about Lysander, and I don't remember if you said it today or when we were chatting about this on Discord, but that you wanted him to, turn, or that you wanted a redemption arc for a gold without being influenced by Darrow. And when you first said that, I was like, but there are loads of golds that are like on the side of the Republic. But it got me thinking, and yeah, it's all been through direct exposure to Darrow or to Virginia or to somebody in contact with Darrow, like almost like a domino effect of exposure to that idea. Even somebody like Virginia, who at the beginning of Red Rising already has some interesting ideas about the society, but it's not like she's full on like, yeah, this is not a just system, we need to completely change it. Like, that comes with time. So I think that is interesting. I wonder if that's, I mean, it's got to be a conscious choice, right? That he's making of like you said, exposure is important. How would you?
Well, because like Fitchner started the Sons of Ares like pretty much because he fell in love with a red. And like Quicksilver was Quicksilver like in love with Mateo at the time? I don't know. Well, he's a silver, so like a little less, but he has maybe more exposure. But like, if you're a gold living with a bunch of golds, like, how are you gonna know? Like, what are just, I don't know. And especially like you're just living the life. You don't care about like you're rich. You just want to like the first gold that Darrow sees when he realizes that Mars has been terraformed. He sees his gold just flying by on grab boots. He's like drunk on wine. He's got some wine bottles. He's like, yeah, ladies, let's go. Like that's what they're doing. They're not like they're not like the plight of the Reds though. Like maybe some of them are, but for the most part, yeah, like you said, like if you're like in a place of extreme privilege and getting like choosing to change, like you're actively putting yourself in a worse position. And these people who are so used to like, we are literally genetically built to be superior. Like, why would we? This is settled. Like, we're not debating social hierarchy anymore. It's settled. Like, we're golds. Go fuck yourself. Like, why would they consider that when that's just how it's been for what, like 700 years since the conquering?
Yeah, and there's like, there's always people that try to bring it back to genetic superiority, and it's all bullshit. But in this case, it's actually true that they have been genetically modified to be, I mean, if it's actually like superior objectively is a whole other question, but they are different genetically and purposefully so. So that's really interesting. And I think that lends credibility to somebody like Lysander, who thinks that the idea of the society is a good thing. And he's wrong, but you understand where he's coming from or why he would think that because of the position that he's in and the whole context of it. I
don't know.
I love that after like reading the first book the first time, and it's like, yeah, Hunger Games on Mars and whatever, and fun
time.
Here we are talking about life.
Yeah, I think that's like the best books do that. It's not just like a fun like, oh, that was a good time, shelve it and go about our day. Like there was no shelve it and go about my day after reading Lightbringer. There was like
yeah,
now
like, what? How do I go about my day? Like, how do you expect me to? I said to Carlos I wanted to go for a whiskey after work, and he was like, okay. So he came and like picked me up from work, and we went for a whiskey. But then we sat in like a whiskey bar, and we had 2 whiskeys. But obviously, I couldn't tell him why I needed a whiskey. And I sat there, and I felt like I wanted to like eulogize Cassius or something. But obviously, I couldn't. And I was also thinking, like, I mean, it's not like he's a real person, but I feel like I need to say something. So I just sat there in silence, and Carlos was like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, no, I'm really not, but I can't really tell you anything, so let's just drink this in silence.
I mean, I don't remember exactly what, like, if it was a study or what it was, but something about how, like, your brain, and when you have, like, an emotional reaction to something, your brain doesn't know whether it's real or, like, fiction. Like, that emotional response is the same. Like, just because he's an emotional, or just because he's a fictional character doesn't make, like, our emotions, like, not, it doesn't make it fictional grief. Like, the grief is real, whether or not the character is real. So, like, yeah, like there was like collective mourning going on for Cassius. And I think just like the amount of, like, we've been talking for like 2 hours, and then not to mention the hours we've spent talking about it on Discord. And this book's been out for 3 weeks. Like, I think Cassius deserves a eulogy. And yeah, I can imagine just going out and like, you're just sipping whiskey and Carlos is like, you okay? You're like, no, but I can't tell you why. It's like, how was your book? Like, you ever think about the greater good? Social hierarchy systems. Like, Yeah, no, it's an amazing book that it can inspire not just like the emotions, but also just like the like so much thought about life and society and other people and friendship and brotherhood and um not to mention, just like side note, like Pierce Brown, I'm so impressed with how he writes both men and women. Like there's jokes about like, you know, men writing women and she breasted boobily down the stairs and all of that. And then but like also the writing of men, like he is so like nuanced and beautiful with the men he creates. Like they show emotions, but you're never like these men cry and call each other brother, but you're never questioning like are they a real man or are they badass or like are they really masculine. Like he just does such a good job of just presenting them as like such real people. Yeah, I am consistently blown away with like the skill that he has in like virtually every area of writing. It's something to behold.
100%. Something really small that I notice and really appreciate is with it happens I think with a couple of characters, but I noticed it specifically with the friendship between Darrow and Cassius, that Cassius shows affection physically. Like he hugs and like, you know, the shoulder squeeze and the hugging. And I think at some point Darrow kisses his forehead or something. I'm like, that is not something that you notice that much when reading male friendships, at least not in the books that I've read. But it's very natural and it's very real. And I really like that. Like again, kind of showing the friendship in different ways, and it makes those moments where they actually say the words more meaningful.
Yeah, totally agree. Rest in peace, sweet, sexy prince. God. Time for a whiskey.
Yeah. On top of all that, like he makes it thematically rich and deep and great characters, and it's also just really fun. It's still fun and pace so quick to read. Hats off.
I think it was Kev said it, like reading part 1 of Dark Age was like I've never been like out of breath reading a book, like oh my god, like heart pounding. Like I'm totally a person that like exclaims at books. I'm reading something, I'm like, oh my god, and just through the whole series, I'm just very like vocal and like so reactive. It is so much fun. It's so entertaining. Like Lightbringer's like 700 pages, and it just does not read like 700 pages. It's some books like, you know, you like thinking of a certain section and you're like, I have no idea how I'm going to find that section in this book. But with books like Lightbringer, you're like, oh, that thing, and it was this chapter, and I can find it in 5 minutes. Just because it feels so like well structured and plotted and like purposeful. And great book.
We haven't talked about like the structure a lot, and I don't want to like take up your entire day.
I took today off for this. I'm supposed to be at work right now.
Priorities are important.
Exactly.
But yeah, the structure, like the way he does POVs, I really, really like. And I think in Dark Age, it took me, or maybe even in Iron Gold, I don't remember that book as well as Dark Age because it scarred me less. But I had to get used to it. So I generally, when I'm reading a multiple POV book, like if I finish a chapter of a POV that I'm enjoying, I will check when they're back. And more often than not, it's like, oh, in like 5 chapters or whatever. But when you're reading Red Rising, sometimes it's like, oh, this POV is back until 250 pages from now. And at first, I was like a bit frustrated by that. I'm like, oh no, but I want more like alternation between them and variety rather than focusing all the time. But I actually really, really love that he does that because it gives the plot line so much momentum because you're staying with it for longer, and really like the back and forth between Lysander and Virginia and then Lysander and Darrow, depending on where the action was, made it, I don't know, like it I think it would have cut off that momentum if we then shifted to, oh, let's check in with Virginia in the middle of like the battle with Fa or something, you know, or like right after it, right before it. I'd rather not know anything about what she's doing until Red God.
Yeah, he totally knows like how to, not just to keep like the momentum of things, but like kind of where to cut things and everything. Ben and I were just talking about this, how in Dark Age, like you have the Day of Red Doves and you just have like the most like soul shattering things happening. And then, but that part doesn't end there. The part ends with Ephraim being like hopped up on obsidian drugs, like waving a mop around, thinking it's a weapon. And that's where the part ends. So yeah, he's just so effective with like placement of POVs. Like I didn't even notice that we hadn't had a Virginia POV. Like I was like at the end, I was like, oh yeah, like Virginia's way back there. I guess we'll, you know, it was like such a natural closing point. Yeah. And rather than like, oh, I need to put a Virginia POV in here to balance things out, like that's the opposite. That wouldn't have been balanced out. So yeah, he does a great job with knowing when things need to come into play for like the maximum impact and like to really keep you turning pages. Yeah, super well paced. I feel like there's really very few like lulls in the books. I have a hard time thinking of anything that was like, oh, this part is super boring, or oh, this POV I don't care about. Like it's always like you turn the page, you're like, ooh, Lyria, like ooh, more Lysander. Yeah. And it helps that all the characters are so real feeling that it's never like, oh, another. Well, I know some people have problems with some characters, but not me.
Yeah, I enjoy all of them. Like even a character that I don't like is doing interesting things. So I'm interested in reading their POV. I also think that he chooses what POV to show us something from really well when there's several options. Like we were talking about the fight between Sevro and Cassius earlier. He could have shown us that from Lyria's POV, but we got Darrow, right? I'm getting that right.
I think so, yeah, because Lyria gets like punched in the face and she's out in the corner.
Yeah, so we could have gotten that from Lyria because like she gets in on the action, but it is more effective because of the character's history to have it from Darrow's. Those choices I find really interesting as well, or like how he alternates between Lysander and Darrow. Just thinking of, I think everybody highlights this in Dark Age, like that battle that we get from Lysander. And then we go back to Darrow. That's genius. And it gets you to chuckle, but it also in the moment, but then you think about it and it's a really effective way to comment on war as well. Like something that is, you know, this formative experience to one person, to somebody else. You're like,
light work, no reaction.
Yeah. Like, oh, it's another day, like whatever. And that's where Darrow is in Dark Age. Like in Iron Gold and Dark Age, I was questioning if I was still meant to like Darrow. I was like, is he gonna flip and like show us Darrow as like becoming some sort of antagonist or anti-hero or villain even in some way? I love that he didn't, but he really had me believing that that is somewhere that he could go, and it made the Lightbringer journey so much more rewarding. And you said that earlier, like he couldn't have gotten there without everything that happened before. The tone of Lightbringer being more hopeful was so needed after Dark Age, because I don't think I could have coped with another Dark Age as much as I loved that book.
Yeah, that book was so heavy. Just like at every corner, everyone dealing with everything. I thought it was really, again, with more like POV choices, that it's Lyria is the one to tell Sevro about Ulysses, and not even like think that she's breaking the news. Like she's just like, I'm so sorry about this, and he's like, what are you talking about? And it's like, oh shit. Yeah, just the way that information gets, and it's so like true to life too, like accidentally letting things slip that I didn't know you didn't know about that kind of thing, versus a big like fan servicey like, oh, comes home to Victra and it's this big to do. Like it's just a quick interaction with some red. Yeah, great POV and info dropping choices.
Yeah. Oh,
Bilbo.
Can you see him?
I saw him earlier jump.
Oh,
that's cute. I don't know what mine's like getting into trouble somewhere around here. I'm surprised she hasn't knocked the whole thing over.
She has to respect the importance of the matter at hand.
She does, yeah. Man, I'm about to go into Golden Sun for round 2 of Golden Sun, and I don't know, man. I don't know if I can handle like Lightbringer, Cassius, and Darrow into like Golden Sun, Cassius, and Darrow. Like,
I know. I'm about to
I don't
start.
like this.
Yeah, I started Golden Sun
be friends
because Carlos read it, but he said yeah, so I'm gonna go back to it as well. So
he didn't go straight into Morning Star. So A, what's wrong with him? And B, is he okay? Like, how did he do with the end of Golden Sun?
I was trying because he was going to finish it at night, and I was trying to stay up to see his reaction, but I fell asleep.
Oh,
no. But yeah, I was fully expecting the next morning to wake up and have him like, yeah, Morning Star is on my nightstand, ready to go. And hold on. Did he take it with him? I don't want to call him out wrongfully. Anyway, I don't think he did. Yeah, I don't know how that's possible. I finished Golden Sun, and I'm not even sure if I waited a day to start Morning Star. Straight into it.
Yeah. No, it's like, it feels so. You've read A Song of Ice and Fire, right? Or you're like familiar with everything? Okay.
Yeah,
I probably shouldn't say anything, just like in case somebody isn't. But there's an event at the end of Storm of Swords that feels like it's kind of the benchmark of like the shocking, violent, huge turning point thing. Mm-hmm. And it feels like it almost gets used too much. Like, oh, it's the blank blank of this series. It feels like the Red Rising series has like 3 of them. And they're all like, I don't understand why this series isn't seen more as like the like literature hard hitter that it is. Like, yes. Is it because Pierce Brown is like pretty young? Is it because the first book is like YA adjacent? I don't know what that means, but like, what's the deal, y'all?
I just think he's so underrated as a writer, and the series is so underrated, like you said, for like literary merit. Because even, yeah, it's popular, but yeah, as like this fun space opera, and it's just so much more than that. I think it is in a way a hard sell because of like the gradual like descent into harrowing humanity questioning territory. But yeah, it frustrates me. Like every time I see that first book and the what is it, the blurb, like first Ender, and then Katniss, now Darrow, something like that. That's just not doing it any favors.
Yeah.
Kev is saying it's because sci-fi, it's sci-fi, and for some reason people still look down on sci-fi and fantasy. I mean, I guess also that, but even within those circles, I find like sometimes it doesn't get the hype it deserves, even if it gets hype. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like, I have unrealistic expectations of how much hype it get, but
maybe we're just like crazy super fans. But like, no, even like all the research that goes into like all of the like Roman, like he's such a history nerd, and it's so well researched and like just so well done on all of like the Odysseus and like the Odyssey and the Iliad retelling sections of it. Yeah, it just feels like so much attention has been paid to so many aspects, to like the philosophy, to the history. to just the world's building, the solar system building. It just all feels so like meticulous. And yeah, the further you get in the series, the more apparent that is. But it's interesting because I would never, there's nothing about, especially after rereading it, there's nothing about book one that I would say should be changed. Like,
yeah, I agree.
Like if you were to like revise it to try to get that literary merit, like I don't see what you would change. Like it kind of has to have those humble beginnings, just like Darrow. Like has to start as a red and turn into the gold that it becomes, but that necessitates you giving it a chance and growing with it. So yeah, really interesting how the series kind of mirrors Darrow's growth like in itself.
Yeah, totally. And that can't be planned, right? So it just kind of happened naturally. It's insane. It actually blows my mind. I don't know, like the stars aligned or something. But yeah, no, I agree, because I was wondering how I would feel about Red Rising, rereading it after having read the entire series and knowing where it goes and knowing where Pierce's writing has gone. And sure, you're reading Red Rising and you're very clearly not reading Dark Age or Lightbringer. But I agree, I wouldn't change anything. And if the events of it were different, there are so many things that wouldn't hit as hard or work as well later, because it's so important that they had that formative school experience that everything is then based on. And I also don't find his writing to be bad in Red Rising at all. Like it gets a lot better, but it was good to begin with.
Oh yeah, no, especially on the reread, I'm like, what are we talking about? This is great. I think I gave it like 4 stars on the first read. I was surprised the first time because I was expecting it to be not good. And again, I think that's like an expectations problem that like it's sold as like fun YA space opera. And I'm not like I'm not the biggest sci-fi person. I would definitely on the side of like fantasy in the science fiction fantasy realm. But now I'm like, I don't know. This is like better than anything else. So, but like to kind of bring it back, I think it's so much more about the humanity than it is about the science fiction. Like all of the really important moments are just like humans being humans and relating to each other just with like different backdrops that bring out different aspects of humanity and human nature. Yeah, so whether it's science fiction or YA, like its literary merit to me is now unquestionable. And even just within its own sci-fi sphere, I think it deserves more credit.
For sure. I feel like maybe I'm vastly generalizing because I'm not as like active in like sci-fi circles or anything. I don't read as much sci-fi, but I get the feeling with a lot of people that read primarily science fiction that the science elements are really important, and the science concepts and how well done they are and how like realistic they are and that kind of thing. That like a more, fun space opera science in sci-fi can get looked down on or dismissed. And then, more maybe Red Rising is a series that is more popular with fantasy fans who also read sci-fi. Like maybe we're just the perfect audience for it because it has a lot of fantasy world building elements to it. It just happens to be space rather than medieval England.
Yeah, like if Neil Stevenson wrote Red Rising, we would have like a 400-page like portion of the book that's just like how grav boots work.
Yeah, and I would probably
and then everyone would love this series. But I don't want that. But that's probably because I like fantasy more than science fiction in general.
Yeah, I'm very grateful that he chose to give like things like grav boots just names that are self-explanatory, and I can kind of picture whatever I want. And sometimes they look kind of ridiculous in my mind, like when I picture things. And it took me a while to know what I was meant to picture with the razors.
Mhm.
But he does it in a way that he doesn't then have to spend pages and pages explaining how it works and what it is. And that is completely fine by me. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, and I think there's like some element of like it should be kind of foreign. Like if we could picture it perfectly, it's not like, and that's probably not right. Like they're so far more advanced than we are. Like I should be like, huh? Every time I see Pulse Fist, and I have to like kind of like figure it out. Like how does that work? But that's probably a good thing. If it was super easy for me to picture, then it would feel like too familiar and not like magical enough. So yeah, I think he strikes like a really good balance of like science-y, but not over-explained to the point where it still has that like weight to it, that it feels far future, but still plausible, like foreign and alien enough, but not like ununderstandable. So I think he has a good balance of that. And I also appreciate that he does that, and that we don't have to slog through like the engineering innards of like gold appliances. That's just me though.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah. Just grav boots. They work. Cool. Good enough for me.
Yeah. Gravity. Cool. Got it. Yeah. I have totally been ignoring the chat a little bit, but somebody ages ago said something about Volga.
Oh yeah, she was in this book.
Yeah, because we haven't talked about her. I mean, she's not in it that much, but
when she was though, she was ripping out hearts.
Yeah, literally. She was in there. Like how I don't know how to feel, because her scene at the end, with Lyria was great, but she did murder a bunch of people, and in the grand scheme of things, she didn't. Oh, Carlos is here, by the way. He is here to clarify that he did bring Morningstar to Spain.
Carlos, get out of here right now. Like, hello, welcome. We love you. Please leave.
Yeah.
Go read Morningstar.
3 seconds to leave.
Got to start listing off everyone who dies in Morningstar. Nobody dies in Morningstar.
Oh, it's fluffy.
Yeah.
All happy. Yeah. Yeah. So Volga, it's a funny one, right? Because we were talking about how everybody in this series is a war criminal and has a tally of like millions of billions of people. But it's one thing to drop a bomb, right? And there's another one to, with your actual hand, rip somebody's heart out. Or to consider doing it to a friend, even. I don't know how to feel about that. I'm not sure how I feel about Volga.
Same. Yeah, because in Iron Gold and Dark Age, she was in Iron Gold, right? Yeah. She was like the one that was like, I'm not going to set phasers to stun. Like, we're not in the business of killing people indiscriminately around here, even though I'm a like enforcer for a freelancer. I mean, I think a lot of it for me is like man, it's so hard because like Ephraim kind of was in all regards, he was like a father figure to her.
Mm-hmm.
But you can kind of read it like in Iron Gold and Dark Age that he wasn't fully like accepting of her. Like he was kind of condescending to her at times, like kind of like, oh, this dumb obsidian, like not fully giving her full respect. So I can on one hand kind of see how like finally feeling like a father figure of your own race, of your own color, like accepting you for who you are and like encouraging like your nature, whatever that means. So like I get wanting to, especially if you've like gone without that your whole life, like say you've been raised like without a father figure, and then the one that you feel closest to is kind of a dick to you, and then he dies, and then you finally get like your actual blood relative, if test tube relative. And they're like, yeah, embrace your color. And I have like a high place in my art. Like I could see like some childhood trauma rearing its head and being like, yeah, maybe. Like, so I get it. I can see it obviously hurt her to do it. She didn't want it, but like the fact that she did it, I believed that she had it in her to do it. As much as it sucked to watch.
Yeah. It didn't make me completely, well, not completely or at all. It didn't make me turn on her the way, you know, you'd expect if you tell like a random person now, like, oh, there's a character that rips 13 people's hearts out, or is it 13? But yeah, I still like her, and they'd be like, what? So it didn't make me turn on her because like there is context. I do think, or I hope, that we're gonna get more of her and like some kind of, I don't know, character resolution, or like her dealing with that. And I mean, she certainly has daddy issues, which is fair.
Yeah. I'd like to see her like be the queen that Sephi wasn't. Like I liked Sephi, but there was still so much of that like resentment, like earned resentment. Like, yeah, girl, feel your feelings, but like I would like to see Volga. Like Volga's had like both sides now. She's like been with Ephraim and she really loved him, and now she's seen the Obsidians and she's felt like part of them, and now she like rules them. So again, with that balance, that exposure, she like Sephi was what, like living in the like tundra her whole life. Like, what do you know about the world? So I would like to see Volga like, not like, I don't want to say like reparations, but do better like on Mars, and maybe like soften the blow of, it's so hard because you don't want to say that the Obsidians like weren't right in what they did, because like they've been oppressed for longer than anybody, and you get a taste of power. Like, who's to say that you shouldn't? I don't know. It's so.
I get you.
You can't excuse war crimes, but also, if an oppressed class has been so fully wronged the way that the Obsidians have, it feels weird to be like, well, maybe Queen Volga can make up for some of the nonsense they did for a 14th of their oppressed history. I don't know. I have high hopes for Volga going into Red God. I think she'll surprise, impress us.
Yeah, that's a good point of her being what Sephi could have been or should have been. I actually think that just reminded me, I think it's so cool and so interesting, and it adds so much layers as well to the series, that it's not as easy as everybody against the gold, or the high colors against the low colors. Like the Obsidians are extremely oppressed, so are the Reds. And yes, they're allies, but their experiences are different. And you know, they can be in danger of getting into this, you know, I'm more oppressed than you, or my oppression was worse, kind of thing. Or, you know, with the Republic, okay, but is it now all about the Reds? Like that kind of resentment and that kind of idea coming in. I love that he addressed that with the Obsidians in Dark Age. It totally made sense that they were so vulnerable to Atlas's machinations. I was going to say Fa, obviously.
Yeah. Oh man, so many ways for things to go.
Yeah. Do you think we're going to get any new POVs in Red God?
I don't know. So what I'm wondering, do you think we'll still get Lyria POVs in Red God? So I don't know. I don't know who we would get that would really be like, that would really add that much. I don't know. If it was just Darrow, Virginia, Lysander, I feel like that would be plenty. But I don't
Maybe
know.
she will strip it back to the big players. Kev is saying Sevro. Colton is saying Diomedes.
Ooh, okay. I would like that one. I'm like fine not getting Sevro POV. Maybe that's a hot take. Because I know he wrote lots of Sevro POV stuff and then scrapped it for Lightbringer. I'm like fine not. But I also have feelings about Sevro in that he's not my favorite. And I feel like there's something behind the eyelids, like a brain spike from the Abomination set to go off as soon as he's in proximity to Virginia. I don't know. There's no way the Abomination was just like, okay, be free. I'm going to sell you to Apple. Like, no. Something going on there. There's some secret Sevro brain stuff. I don't know.
So interesting. So first of all, he's also not my favorite. I do like Sevro, and I understand why he's so popular.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember first reading like I don't know if it was like the entire like initial trilogy or just like Red Rising, Golden Sun, whatever. And Cassius was my favorite. And I was looking up like stuff online and everybody seemed to love Sevro. And I was like, I mean, yeah, I get it, but like, what's wrong with me?
Cassius is the hot one.
Yeah, I'm just that basic. What can I say? But yeah, tell me more about your Sevro ideas.
I don't know. I don't know what it is about Sevro that, like, I don't want to be in the same room as Sevro.
Oh,
like,
no.
I just don't. He scares me, like, just because, like, he feels so unpredictable to me. Like, he's the kind, like, of friend that you, like, have to walk on eggshells around because you never know what you're going to say that's going to, like, set him off. Mm-hmm. And I just can't. I'm too, like, unfiltered for that kind of friend. I feel like he smells really bad.
Yeah.
And he just feels like he holds grudges. Like, not that he isn't allowed to, because he's had some shit happen to him, but he just, I don't know. I don't think me and Sevro would get along very well. So I just kind of naturally have like a aversion to him. I like him. I love him as a character. I think he's great. One of my like favorite things in the original trilogy. Well, a lot of my favorite things in the original trilogy are Sevro related. I love that he gets Darrow's eyes, the red eyes, like amazing. The Goblin and the Gold chapter where he where Cassius is getting hanged, and he has his whole thing. I love it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think I'd be friends with him. Like,
yeah,
I don't really have any like deep philosophy about why I don't like him.
No, I probably wouldn't be friends with him either, because I'd find it very overwhelming to not know how somebody's going to react. Like, I don't deal with that very well. I do think he's a great character. I think, though, we were talking about perspective earlier, he's the kind of character that if he wasn't on our side, we would probably hate. But he's doing, because he also, I mean, talking about people who do terrible things, like he does very messed up things, but he does them generally for Darrow, to help Darrow. So we're okay with it. But if he was doing it to Darrow, would we be okay with it? Probably not.
Yeah, isn't like when Cassius is going to save the children, Sevro's the first one that's like, absolutely not. Stay your ass right here. We're on mission. Shut up. Don't go. And he's like, but the children don't care about those kids. So like, but we love Sevro. Like, we love Cassius for his honor, but we love Sevro for his whatever he's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he just seems like He's like, he likes to think he's so hard, but he's so emo. Like, just leave me alone in my workshop. I want to make my knives. Like, I get it. Everyone's gone through hell, Sevro. We're all messed up. Like, come have dinner.
I did really like at the end how he I guess has been through his process of grieving, and he still is, of course, but that, I guess, that grief in a way shifts partially to Cassius and how him and Darrow sit down to watch the footage and talk, and it's the first time in the book that he kind of felt like how do I say this? Like a real person that you can trust and talk to and sit down with, you know? Because he was behaving more like a feral creature. That's like never. Just like, you know, taking out his grief and his anger and his frustration on the world, which is completely understandable. But I loved that didn't just get fixed. Like, Sevro's in a really bad place, and we see him be in that place and work through it in whatever way he can. I'm really looking forward to his reunion with Victra as well. And I feel like, I don't know, between Virginia and Darrow and Victra and Sevro, there's no way the four of them all have happy endings riding into the sunset.
Oh, I don't want to think about that. Like, he's not my favorite. Like, I don't want to be his bestie, but I don't want anything bad. I don't want any more bad stuff to happen to him either. Like, he deserves a break. Like, even the whole time, like, I felt so bad for him. Like, if anything, I was almost more looking forward to him getting home than Darrow. Because it feels like Darrow's made these decisions on his own. Darrow's like, okay, I'm going to go do this. Like, it sucks, but I got to go do it. Whereas Sevro's like, stop dragging me along on your missions. Like, I want to go home. Like, Sevro has always wanted to go home. And Darrow's always been like, well, alas. So it was finally, we're going home, and just like the disappointment from Sevro when he realizes it's not happening, and he's just like, he fully just retreats. And that was so sad. It's not, Sevro never gets what Sevro wants. So yeah, I understand why he's so touchy. But yeah, like that whole unpredictable, like feral, like goblin. I would say the wrong thing immediately and get hit. So
100%. I also like having read Lightbringer, knowing that Pierce wrote POV chapters for Sevro and scrapped them. I mean, obviously we don't know what he wrote, and maybe the plot was different, but I can totally see where there would be really interesting stuff to get into Sevro's head in this book. But I think he made the right choice having that process, like having us witness that from Darrow's and Lyria's point of view, rather than being, I think it's more effective that way, like seeing the effect that his grief is having on him and everybody else, as opposed to just being in his head. Yeah.
I also like kind of like him as a character to be so unpredictable. Like, I almost don't want to see behind the curtain. Like, that would just be chaos. Like, I feel like Sevro POV would be exhausting to read.
It would take away that magic of the
and just like chaos. like I like chaos, but I don't want to see it happening. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what other POV of, like, at least for an existing character, would really do it for me in Red God. I'd be happy to just narrow it down a little bit. I want more Virginia. I really want more Virginia.
We're gonna get Virginia, like plenty, I'd say. Yeah.
I think between Darrow, Virginia, and Lysander, like that, if I get 800 pages of just those three, I would give it to me. Give it to me now, Pierce. Where is it?
I mean, it has, like, on that subject, it has got to be like an 800-page book, right? Like, there's no way we can get the plot and all the thematic threads together in any less. It has to be like a brick of a book.
I hope so. Like, I'll take whatever we can get.
Yeah.
It sounds like he wants to pivot to like fantasy after this is done. So I would be excited to see what he does with the fantasy genre.
Yeah.
But I also want more Red Rising. I want like a prequel series. I want like The Conquering.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah. I want like Selenius.
Yeah. Like,
And
what
I
was he
also
like? Was he a psycho, or was he like a deluded,
yeah,
philosopher?
I want to see like the sterilization of everyone on Earth and like the rising of Luna. I also, well, thanks to Evie, I didn't know I wanted it, but now I know I want an Atalantia hot girl book. Just her POV, just her day-to-day life.
Why is she the way she is?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, and I think, again, that just speaks to how good this series is, that there's so much that could be explored. Like, I'm interested in so many aspects that, like, no matter what we get, like, I mean, what more could, like, a creator ask for than fans that always want more of what you have? Like, no matter how much you give them, they're always going to want more. Like, regardless of whether or not you give it to them. Like, just that feels very fulfilling as an artist. So
100%. Yeah. And the world feels so large. Like, I would read a series set entirely on the Rim.
yeah.
Like, that landscape is fascinating. That scene comes to mind of oh my god, names. Atlas's brother.
Romulus?
Romulus, yeah.
Okay.
Where he walks out, that scene was so harrowing and so atmospheric and just overall amazing. I would love to read, like, that is truly a society shaped by the like, I mean, more than just the climate, by the environment that they're in. I feel like that would be so interesting. And then contrasting that to a place like Mercury and like the desert in Mercury, like, it just feels so lived in and real. Like, you could just go to a random place and find an interesting story.
Yeah. Yeah, or even like Venus, with how, like, interestingly it's been terraformed to be like this lush paradise. And yeah, there's so many like hints of cool things, like the carvelings played a big role, like just like the strange animals that people make and they just have them in the trees for people to just mess with. Speaking of the Rim, though, in that scene where Romulus is walking out, one of the most badass moments, I thought, was actually after they save the kids. And it's the Obsidians that come, and Darrow takes his mask off. And he's like, yeah, I'm so badass. Like, the sulfur's like eating at his face and he can't breathe. And he's just like, yeah, show him that you're a god. And then he puts his faceplate back up and he's like, that was amazing.
That was amazing.
Yeah. Just little things like that. Just like the whole, like, the stage of war, like the putting on the, like, and nobody does it better than like Apollonius, but putting on your like war face, like, for the spectacle of the thing, to like get your people riled up and sow discord in the enemy. And all the speeches. Oh, the speeches were like on point this book too.
Oh my god, yes.
Yeah, like the trial, Darrow's speech to all the Rim people, so good.
So good. I think he's so good at showing every side of war, like war being this obviously horrifying thing. And this quote from Lauren that gets quoted of like, violence begets violence begets violence. And he really shows us that to a point where it gets exhausting. Like, Dark Age is an exhausting book to read, because never in a like boring way or anything, but it's like more and more and more. But then he also shows like war is not just the battles. It's propaganda. It's the spectacle of it. It's backstabbing and machinations and tricks and like the whole fa thing, and like there's so many different sides to it. That was just a weird scene.
Kind of ties into like how he names the parts of the book. Like part 1 of Dark Age is like so upsetting, so exhausting, but that part is called Mischief. Like or like part 1 of Lightbringer, like it's all the like Lysander propaganda. It's called Circus. It's like it's like a stage. It's just the whole thing is a stage and just people playing their little parts to get what they want. It's
yeah. I also loved that the assembly that Atalantia calls, where Lysander shows up to like, you know, start manipulating, and it's in the Colosseum. How cool was that? I loved, like, of course that's where they'd go for theater, but it's also just this ancient venue of entertainment. I thought that was it was genius, just like subtext, but also just really cool imagery of like imagining 7 foot tall superhumans in like sci-fi swords and sitting in the Colosseum.
Yeah. And yeah, it just goes to show like their extreme self-importance. Like our meeting has to be in this like, you know, this has to be a whole production. Everything's a production and everything is like about optics. And yeah. Oh, it's so good.
It's so
very
good.
Ancient Rome and self-importance of leaders.
Yeah, he uses that historical influence in a really cool way. Where like, again, going back to like how he doesn't get enough credit. Like when I remember when I first read the first book, and I thought that it felt like he took all of the stuff that he's into and he put it in a bag and he shook it, and that came out. And which was fine by me because I enjoy a lot of those things. So I had a great time with the book. But as the series progresses, the whole like Roman thing becomes so much more than just a cool gimmick or a backdrop or just like an influence that he enjoys, and weaves into the theme and how he presents things, and like you said, like how he names parts, and like it's just really clever and it gives them so much reread value. I'm so looking forward to rereading the entire thing now.
Yeah, I feel like every reread is going to be like more effective. Like it just feels like there's so many Easter eggs that to be uncovered, and especially like the more you learn about actual history. Like the razor, I guess, is actually like based on some kind of weapon that they used.
Really?
Yeah, and he's I feel like his vocabulary has definitely been boosted because I used the dictionary feature on the Kindle like way more often in Lightbringer, and a lot of them he's like shaving his face with like doing something, and it's like a really weird term I hadn't seen, but it was like legit like a blade that ancient Romans used to shave with. It's like the more you learn about history, like from the books themselves, the more you'll pick up on a reread and be like, oh, that's this thing. Like we were talking in the Discord hangout, I think, about like the Sword of Damocles. I don't know if you were in that yet, but they were talking about it. I'm like, oh yeah, we just read about that in Lightbringer. And then yeah, just like the more historical references pop up, and like I don't know, these books like make you smarter about our own history, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. I should use a dictionary more often, is what I've gathered from this.
I read a lot of like China Mieville, which requires a lot of dictionary. I get used to hitting that button on the Kindle. But yeah, it's cool. Like the ones, like the really interesting ones are like, oh, an ancient Roman thing. Like, oh, never would have known. So He's done his research, that's for sure.
Yeah. I think we're at almost 3 hours.
I know. I kind of thought it might go that long. There's so much to. I'm certain there's stuff we didn't even talk about.
For sure. Yeah. Deep Grave was mentioned. We didn't even talk about that entire section of like breaking free Sevro. Which just reminded me, I think that's actually not at that point, that's later, but there were so many parts of this book that made me laugh, and I wasn't expecting it to make me laugh. Like after Dark Age, that made me gasp and cry and scream. Like, is it when they get taken by the daughters? Yeah, where Darrow gets put in a cell and Cassius is already in it, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "I'm on a rescue mission."
Yeah. No, there are so many funny, like, one of the ones I really liked was like they're letting Lyria fly the ship, and she's like, "Look how good I'm getting." Then she's like, and then she almost hit a building.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Yeah. No, there was a lot more lighthearted moments, and then followed up with like absolute heart-wrenching moments. So
yeah,
it's got some range in there. I can't wait to reread it. I know. Did you reread Lightbringer already? I know Ben did.
No, I didn't. I went straight to the beginning again because I didn't think I could see the ending with them watching and reminiscing. It just made me want to read Red Rising.
Yeah.
And I wanted the good old days and not do this to myself straight away again. But now I'm about to do that because I'm going to read the whole series. I'm telling myself I'm going to take it slow. I told myself I was going to do Red Rising on audio, like walking to work in the morning and like walking back home. But my commute is like 25 minutes. So 50 minutes a day was not enough. So I just went over to physical. So I'm just going to read them regularly, like whatever.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I've been doing the audiobooks and they're so good. But I usually just do it on my commute home, which is like maybe 45 minutes. So yeah, it's also not enough. And also like, I'll do it like before bed. I'll put it on and I'll just like fall asleep to it, which means I have to do a lot of rewinding. I think the one I'm most excited to reread is actually Iron Gold. Because I think it's the one I remember the least of. And I read it really fast because I was so excited to get to Dark Age. That I was just like, oh yeah, we're almost there. We're so close. Like we had the original trilogy, which I kind of read slowly because I didn't even know if I would like it at that point. So I got through it, and then I get to Iron Gold, and I'm like, okay, now I get to Dark Age. So I kind of raced through it. Like the only thing I remember from Iron Gold is Darrow is like, listen, I'm going to Mercury. I don't care what you say. And then Cassius murdering all of the Raws. So
yeah, I think I remember the least about Iron Gold as well, because it is kind of a setup book. Like we're catching up with where things are after 10 years. And I mean, we introduced Pax. But yeah, the most memorable part of it is that I remember the most is definitely Cassius and the Raz and the original My Honor Remains. Which is just so painful now. Oh my God, that's going to destroy me when I get to it and reread it.
And then Dark Age, we get destroyed again when Cassius shows up at the very end. He's alive and he's on our side. But we know what's going to happen. Don't get too attached. Challenging impossible. Yeah.
I was really upset when Lysander killed Alexander at the end of Dark Age. And I feel like Alexander is a version of Cassius. Like he's the same type of person, of same type of gold. But then his relationship with Darrow's niece was so adorable. And I got really attached. And then we think he's dead and he comes back. And he did this twice, because we think he's dead, and then he comes back, and I was like, well, we had a fake death, so he's not going to real die now. And he did. And then I thought the same about Cassius. I was like, well, he just came back.
Same. Yeah, I'm like, there's no way he's going to kill Cassius. He just did that to us, and it was fake out. So no, we just don't learn, do we?
We don't learn.
We should have known. I don't know. As soon as he's like, you're my brother, I'm like, oh, this is not going to go good. You can't say stuff like that 100 pages from the end of the book.
Yeah. And when he says, I don't remember if Darrow suggests it or Cassius, but they talk about like Cassius coming to the mine to like us with Darrow someday. And yeah, I was like, don't make plans. Don't make plans.
It's like that, son. Next time we see each other, I'll tell you all about your mother. Well, bye.
Yeah.
Yeah. We never learn. We fall for it every time.
Every time.
It's so fun to fall for it, though, isn't it?
It is. It's so painful. This is really like, I finished this book, and I think I said it in my very incoherent Goodreads review. Like, this is why I love reading. It has everything. It's the kind of book that has you thinking about life's big questions, and we're talking about the meaning of the greater good and like society and political systems, and at the same time it's just a really fun story with amazing characters that feel like real people, that is extremely compelling to read and transports you to a different world and gets you laughing and crying and like really afraid. It has everything. Like, I don't understand why this is not being praised by everyone and their mother. Like,
absolutely. And yeah, it's been super fun, like getting to know you better, talking about it to you.
Yes.
Like, and just everyone that has like been reading this book since it came out. Like, I feel like we've had so many good conversations, and they've been like super respectful, because it's easy to like think like, I shouldn't talk about how I maybe like Lysander because he's a fascist. Like, maybe don't be a fascist sympathizer. But like, because these books are so nuanced and we've all read them together, like it makes for like so much generosity and like good faith in conversation. Especially now, I don't know, it's easy to be like, oh, well, you're a bad person because XYZ. But yeah, these books and the conversations around it show that, you know, there's so much nuance to everything, and generally, like, I don't know, maybe it's a little too optimistic to think this way, but like, I like to think that people are generally good people and have good intentions, and like trying to see the good in evil people. I don't think that's a bad thing. So it's been really fun having like a ton of conversations about these terrible atrocities and the friends we make along the way of war, you know?
I could not agree more. Like, the book is a special book, but the experience of reading it like with a group, and like the anticipation to it, and like the discussions that have come from it, make it so much more special. Like, I mean, when you talk about these things, you get even more out of it because you get new perspectives, and like you start thinking about stuff that you maybe didn't pick up on the first time, or that you thought about differently. Like, I've thought about Lysander in a much more nuanced way since talking to you. Like, I mean, I still hate him, but you know, I'm less like, oh, this is just very simple. There's good and evil. He's evil, you know, like, not that I was thinking it as black and white, but it was certainly more like clear cut. And like, since talking to you and like thinking about it more, I think about him a little bit differently. And that's really cool.
Yeah, same. And talking to you, I totally changed my mind on Lysander. I was like, I maybe got duped a little bit. So yeah, because I was like really upset at the end of Lightbringer. I was really upset about that. And then talking to you and talking in the Discord and kind of seeing the light Yeah, no, it's I like having my opinions change. It's always fun to see new perspectives that, because yeah, again, how are you going to know something that you don't know? You need to be exposed to new ideas, and we are all better for it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I guess I'm going to raise this empty cup of cold brew.
Yeah.
Our fallen brother, Cassius Bologna, Morning Knight of the Republic, son of
Tiberius.
Tiberius, son of Julia, brother of Darrow, handsome lad. Rest in peace. But actually this time.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a pleasure to watch you die twice. And Pierce Brown, I know you're watching this. Thanks for writing this amazing series. The GOAT of science fiction.
Absolutely. You will get your credit someday, Pierce. I know you're one of the 8 people watching.
He's been here the whole time.
Just lurking.
Seriously.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think we're on 3 hours on the dot, so that seems like a good way to wrap it up. Thank you to everybody who's been in the chat. I mean, 8 people has wildly exceeded my expectations. So thank you for
with exquisite taste.
Absolutely. Yeah, here on a Wednesday at I don't even know what time, from 2 corners of the world. That's really cool. All right.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was super fun.
Yeah, we should do this again sometime and talk about Throne of Glass.
Yes, I'm so down. That's the only book I was reading the last book of Throne of Glass and Lightbringer at the same time. And then I finished them at the same time, and I haven't read a book since, and I don't know what to do with myself now. So
that's fair. I finished my year of rest and relaxation because I technically started that before Lightbringer. I started that the day before I got Lightbringer, obviously dropped it. But then I finished that, and I am reading Empire of the Vampire. I haven't finished it yet, though.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And I finished one book.
That's a good one, though. That's another like really entertaining page turn. So yeah, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm just gonna retire from reading until Red God comes out.
Just keep reading Red Rising over and over again. Like that's
fine.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. I have actually finished a book. I finished Red Rising.
There you go. There's 6 of those, plenty until God gets announced, and then I can start counting down for it.
Exactly. Yeah. Red God, 482 days away. Mark your calendars.
Okay, cool. I'll click end broadcast. I don't know if that kicks us out of the stream, but
we'll still be here. We can talk for another 3 hours about Lightbringer.
Great.
Give the real hot takes so we don't need the public to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.